Chapter 100. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Poplar Fruit coaxed his daughter to sleep after eating lunch. The press conference was expected to last for 2 hours. Kiki usually slept for 2 to 3 hours at noon, so 3 hours was enough for her to sleep now. In the dressing room, Poplar Fruit changed into Givenchy's formal attire. He declined the makeup artist's suggestion to put on some light makeup as he was particularly resistant to makeup. Perhaps it was because of the trauma he had when he was a child. At that time, all the children in the kindergarten were covered in a thick layer of powder. He still remembered that feeling of disgust. Perhaps the makeup artist saw that Poplar Fruit's complexion was not bad and was easy to talk to, so he smiled and let him go. After changing into his attire, Poplar Fruit's charm soared. When he walked out, he became the focus of the entire preparation room, especially the young girls and female staff. It was as if Poplar Fruit was a magical magnet. Once their eyes were glued to him, they could not look away. Who is he? The girls whispered to each other in twos and threes. I think it's that translator called Poplar Fruit, someone said proudly. He's Poplar Fruit? I didn't expect him to be so handsome. A few girls' eyes were almost curved into a heart shape. That's right, that's right. Don't you think he's so tall? A few girls' attention was on Poplar Fruit's long legs. I heard that it's most suitable for a boyfriend to be 18 centimeters taller than himself. He's the perfect Prince Charming. Handsome and tall. Hey, you're more than 18 centimeters, right? I think I'm the most suitable one. Hey, I don't think I can sleep tonight. A girl covered her burning face and said, Xiao Yu, you perverted girl. Everyone laughed at her. A girl came over and giggled. I say, don't even think about it. It's not your turn. I saw him carrying a child. Ah, how can it be? The girls had a look of disbelief. He has a child at such a young age? After receiving the affirmation from their companions, the girls' hearts were broken. Why is it that every handsome guy we just met is already taken? This was just a small episode that happened in the corner of the hall. Poplar Fruit had no idea that he had become the topic of discussion of those girls. After Poplar Fruit came out, he stood beside Zheng Yujie and listened to her arrangements. Zheng Yujie had also changed into a neat business attire. She wore a white shirt with a lace collar and a tight black skirt suit. Her curvy figure looked even hotter in the suit. Poplar Fruit was no saint. His gaze involuntarily drifted to Zheng Yujie's buttocks. He thought that he had done it discreetly, but women had the strongest sixth sense. How could Zheng Yujie not notice Poplar Fruit's little trick? However, she didn't show it. Not only was she not angry, but she was also overjoyed. I knew you weren't Lu Xiaohui. To be appreciated by the person she liked. Zheng Yujie's heartfelt smile at this moment was just like the old saying. A woman dresses up for herself. The reporters who had been taken to lunch by Dongxin Publishing's Public Relations Department returned to the hall of the press conference. Under the guidance of etiquette, they found their seats in their own newspapers and sat down. There was an unspoken rule in domestic news reports. Even Dongxin Publishing was no exception. The pockets of the reporters who returned were bulging. They had received a lot of benefits. There were so many newspapers present, and most of them had some relationship with Dongxin Publishing. Many of them patted their chests and promised that they wouldn't make things difficult for Dongxin Publishing. Therefore, there was no tense atmosphere at the press conference. Instead, most of the people were talking and laughing, as if they were attending a tea party. Poplar Fruit looked backstage and shook his head, feeling strange. Don't worry. Zheng Yujie saw Poplar Fruit shaking his head and thought he was nervous. She squeezed his hand and said, It's all according to the procedure. There won't be any problems. Poplar Fruit pulled his hand out of Zheng Yujie's soft palm, touched his nose, and said with a smile, I'm not worried. It's just my first press conference. It feels a little unreal. Regardless of whether it was real or not, the press conference began as scheduled at 3:30 p.m. In addition to the protagonists Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, there was also the president of Ingyan Network, Chen Fuzong, and the editor-in-chief of Dongxin Publishing, Pang Yu. Pang Yu was still a little worried. She was mainly present to support Zheng Yujie. Professor Luo Lin, a senior translator from Beijing Foreign Studies University, was also on the rostrum. He was a senior translator. His most famous translations were Milton's Paradise Lost, Paradise Restored, Samson, and other famous works. He was also quite famous in the translation industry. Dongxin Publishing's press conference this time was different from ordinary press conferences. In order to make people more convinced, they arranged a live Q&A environment with Professor Luo and Poplar Fruit. It was more useful to let the professionals give the correct evaluation. After a simple introduction, the press conference gradually went on the right track. Various newspapers reached out their hands and asked their own questions. In the beginning, they asked more questions about the biggest star in the arena, Pang Yu. Chief Editor Pang, we and most of the netizens have the same question. That is, how is the translation quality of the Chinese version of Steve Jobs' biography? A newspaper asked a very formal question. Pang Yu smiled and said, "Today's questions about Steve Jobs' biography should be answered by our deputy editor, Zheng Yujie, and our translation team leader, Poplar Fruit. But you asked the right person to ask this question, who told me to be one of the few people who just happened to read the sample book. It can't be helped. I have been looking forward to this book for a long time. Don't blame me for being in a favorable position." Pang Yu's witty words caused the audience to laugh. I'll evaluate it from the perspective of a book friend. I think this book is really good. It's true. At that time, I was fascinated by it. I couldn't help but call Yang Guo and the others to translate faster, even though they were about to scold me to death. The audience burst into laughter again. I think the translation quality is good. Of course, this doesn't mean that my opinion is the truth. Translation has always been a matter of benevolence and wisdom. Whether it is good or not, and whether the readers like it or not, they still have to buy a copy and read it at home before they can make an evaluation. Pang Yu paused for a moment, then added, "But the current situation is that many readers have not read the book yet, and they have already commented on the book. We don't support this approach." Deputy Editor Zheng, I have a question for you. A reporter raised his hand. After getting permission, he stood up and asked, "We all know that at that time, there were thousands of applicants for the Translation Network's nationwide audition. But with so many choices, why did you finally choose 4 translators who had no experience in translating long works?" This question was not sharp, but it was within the expectations of Zheng Yujie. Zheng Yujie calmly picked up the microphone and replied, "We have 2 criteria for choosing translators. First, the best. Translators who can pass our 3 rounds of auditions are people who have extraordinary attainments in English and Chinese. Second, the most suitable. Every translator can't grasp all the themes. For our biography of Steve Jobs, to be our translator, he must have a strong interest in electronic products. We don't need him to be a fan of Steve Jobs, but he must be able to understand the thoughts of Steve Jobs in this book. Otherwise, we will never feel at ease letting him be the messenger of information." Zheng Yujie said calmly. She was indeed from a big family. Even in front of so many cameras, she could still be calm and even exude an aura of confidence. "So we chose Poplar Fruit and 3 other translators. They are both excellent and competent for this task. Now it seems that our choice is correct," Zheng Yujie said with a smile. "We've heard about the crowdsourced translation of Steve Jobs' biography," he said. "But why not just 1 translator? Why did you choose 4 translators? We all know that everyone has their own habits when it comes to translating." Isn't Dongxin Publishing House afraid that there will be 4 different styles in one book? A newspaper asked. Actually, it's not like there's no precedent for choosing 4 translators to translate together. 2 years ago, Dongxin Publishing used the crowdsourced translation method to publish The Adventures of the Little Prince. Later on, the market response was good. So this time, we have experience to rely on. We are not blindly bold to use such an important book as our experimental field, Zheng Yujie said with a smile. Using 4 translators is actually our helplessness. Everyone knows that our book has more than 500,000 words, and it only took us 30 days to translate it. From the beginning, the foreign publishers did not leave us much time. Not to mention, there were all kinds of unexpected things that happened later on. In the end, the translation team was only left with 30 days. Speaking of this, Zhang Yujie remembered some interesting things when she urged Poplar Fruit to hand in the manuscript. Her heart was moved, but she did not show it on her face. In such a tight time, we can't give the book to one person to translate slowly. We can only use the crowdsourced method and gather everyone's strength to finish the translation before the deadline, Zhang Yujie said with a smile. If it weren't for the efforts of Poplar Fruit and the other 3 translators, we wouldn't have been able to catch up with the global release plan. And the readers who have been looking forward to this book for a long time wouldn't have been able to see the only official autobiography designated by Steve Jobs. Chapter 101. As for the problem of the translation style of Steve Jobs' biography being inconsistent, let's let Mr. Yang, Poplar Fruit, answer it for everyone. I think, other than him, no one is more qualified to answer this question. After Zhang Yujie finished speaking, she turned her head slightly and glanced at Poplar Fruit. Poplar Fruit smiled at her and nodded. Although the two of them did not discuss it before, at this moment, it was as if they were partners who had worked together countless times. They understood each other's meaning at a glance. Perhaps, they were telepathic. Thank you. Poplar Fruit turned the head of the microphone to himself. Looking at so many people and cameras, he was a little nervous at first, and his voice trembled slightly. In order to hide his nervousness, he even patted the microphone, making a banging sound. The whole audience was looking at him. It was quiet, and the atmosphere was a little oppressive. After taking a deep breath, Poplar Fruit's beating heart calmed down. At first, he still followed the rules and read the script that he had already prepared. I can understand everyone's concerns. When I received the notification that I passed the assessment, I also hesitated for a long time because of this problem. Many of my reporter friends here may know that my main job is to take on translation tasks at Cinda Company. None of the tasks that I have done have been completed with others. This is the first time that I have translated with others, not to mention working with so many people. It was like chatting. Slowly Yanggua's speech became smoother and smoother. But if you flip through the translated works of foreign literature, it's not hard to find that many of the translated works have 2 or more translators, and there are many excellent works between them. Later, after a month of translating, I realized that it wasn't impossible to work with others to achieve a unified style. In my opinion, literary translation can be divided into 2 styles. One is the style of words and sentences, and the other is the overall style of the translation. When talking about his field of expertise, Poplar Fruit's eyes began to flash with confidence, and the rhythm of his speech became clearer. Choosing words and making sentences. This style, or rather habit, is formed over a long period of time. It's very easy to be subtly influenced by one's past learning, life, work, and other experiences. Yanggua counted with her fingers. For example, the style of urban people who often use the internet and the older generation of scholars who only contact print media are obviously different. Another example is the style of people who dominate the financial industry and people who have been immersed in the IT industry for many years. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. As the saying goes, it is easy to change mountains and rivers, but hard to change one's nature. I am most worried that it is difficult to reach a consensus. However, what surprised me was that in the translation team, the style of the 4 of us is actually not that different. Poplar Fruit turned to look at the others on the stage and said with a smile, I think I should thank Chief Editor Pang and Deputy Editor Zhang of Dongxin Publishing, and President Chen of Ingyan Network. When the 2 of them cooperated to select translators, not only were the translators selected very excellent, but their styles were also very similar. In fact, this is not difficult to understand. The 4 of us are university graduates, and we have a good understanding of the technology industry and new things. For example, we are very interested in Apple and Steve Jobs himself. Of course, being interested in Steve Jobs does not mean that we are all hardcore fans of Steve Jobs. Let me tell you a secret here. One of the translators in our team is a Steve Jobs hater. He knows Steve Jobs' life like the back of his hand, but he often studies it with a critical eye. Poplar Fruit paused for a moment. Soft laughter came from the audience. He then said, however, this does not prevent us from having a pleasant conversation when translating this book. Moreover, we are all very young, and our knowledge comes not only from the books we have studied, but also from the internet. Most importantly, we are all very interested in English. I am ashamed to say that I am the only one who graduated from a professional class, but also the only one who has not obtained any translation certificate. Poplar Fruit pretended to wipe the cold sweat off his forehead. Of course, everyone is an individual, and there will still be differences in the style of words and sentences. However, during the review process, I will correct the inconsistencies in everyone's translation and strive to maintain the overall style. Poplar Fruit said confidently. He raised 2 fingers and said, "The second style is the overall style of the translation. What is the style of writing? For example, some authors have a literary style, either using poetry or a sad tone. Some authors have a refreshing style, which is very comfortable to read. Some writing styles are profound and obscure, and some are simple and easy to understand. Different styles of writing will give different feelings to the readers. You may have some misunderstandings in this regard. You may think that a translator's translation should be in this style or that style. Actually, this is wrong." Poplar Fruit said seriously. A qualified translator's style of writing will never be the same. For different source languages, especially literary works, translators will change their style of writing according to the style of the author. If it never changes, then the translator is not translating, but rewriting the original work. Yonggua's eloquence and assurance didn't make the reporters feel bored. In his field of expertise, he showed the demeanor of a master. The cadence of his voice and the simple explanation made everyone intoxicated. It was as if they were listening to Professor Yi Zhongtian's analysis of the 3 kingdoms. Even Professor Rowling, who was sitting next to him, nodded from time to time and showed an expression of agreement. Translating literary works and scientific documents are different concepts. The latter could be translated as long as one had a good command of English. This was because technical documents focused on conveying the meaning on the surface. There was no need to think about the style and wording of the translation. You could even use word-for-word translation. As long as the translation could be understood and accurately conveyed the information of the document, it was enough. However, literary works are different. We have a very famous translator called Nida. He proposed the functional equivalence translation theory. Translation is the most appropriate, natural, and equivalent language to reproduce the source language from semantics to style. This means that the translator has to consider whether the reader can get the same feeling as the original reader. So in addition to the meaning level, the translator also has to consider whether the style of writing matches the original author. After another long discussion, one of the reporters couldn't help but interrupt and ask, "Then how are you going to unify your writing style? Can you unify it just by saying it?" His voice was very abrupt and attracted everyone's attention. However, he raised his head and looked provocative. Finally, there was a different voice in the press conference. Poplar Fruit paused for a moment, but he still calmly said, "Thank you for the question. I would like to ask readers to rest assured that before we started the translation, we had many meetings and chose a language style that we all thought was most suitable for the translation." After talking for so long, you still didn't say anything. I think you guys can't even come up with a style. You're just a gigolo who relies on women, and you want to fool us? Said the reporter as he stood up and pointed at Poplar Fruit. As soon as his voice fell, the audience below the stage buzzed and became chaotic. The reporters in the audience were not stupid. It was obvious that someone invited him to cause trouble. Some of them were discussing the gossip behind the incident, and some were analyzing whether what he said made sense. "Everyone, quiet down." Peng Yu slammed the table and spoke into the microphone. She was indeed a senior editor-in-chief in the industry. With one sentence from her, everyone stopped the commotion and turned to look at her. "The first time you didn't raise your hand and asked questions without permission, I can forgive your ignorance. The second time, you went from bad to worse and spread rumors. You disregarded the order of the press conference. Where do you put your peers? Sorry, we don't welcome reporters like you. Security, please expel him from the venue." As soon as Peng Yu finished speaking, 2 burly security guards surrounded him and forcefully dragged him away. After the door of the venue was closed, Peng Yu's expression eased a little. She said, "Let's continue." Poplar Fruit was full of admiration. Peng Yu's aura was too strong. The entire venue was stunned by her, and no one dared to say a word. After receiving Peng Yu's signal, Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Okay, let me explain to everyone why we chose this style of writing. The main reason is because the author, Mr. Isaacson, has a very plain style of writing. If you read his other biography, Franklin, you will know that Mr. Isaacson focused on readability. His language was simple and clear, and his reasoning was particularly clear. So we decided to continue the style of the original. If we chose a different style, like a romance novel, where the emotions are very strong, then the effect of the book would be distorted. You would even say that Steve Jobs is not like this. He is not an emotional person. So we will try our best to restore the authenticity of the original, and not adapt it with the unique literary style of Chinese." As Poplar Fruit spoke, the admiration in Professor Rollins' eyes became even stronger. The problem of different styles was solved very well from the very beginning. What impressed me even more was that as the translation deepened, everyone's cooperation became more and more tacit. Poplar Fruit said with a smile, "This chapter is purely boasting. Don't think that it was copied and pasted from somewhere, and don't think that it is a real translation theory. Insiders, please laugh it off." Chapter 102. We are supporting each other and learning from each other. Under such a positive team atmosphere, everyone is progressing very quickly. There are fewer things that I need to correct. This feeling of working together to do something is really great. It can be said that without everyone working together, it is impossible for us to translate more than 500,000 words of biographical literature in a month. It is cooperation that makes miracles happen. Poplar Fruit said grandly. Poplar Fruit's sincere statement made some of the reporters below the stage couldn't help but applaud. The next few questions were very formulaic, and the few people on the stage also answered very casually. Poplar Fruit also met a few questions that he easily answered. However, it was obvious that not all of the reporters were here to support Dongxin Publishing. Some of them were dissatisfied with this kind of harmonious scene, so they wanted to dig out some exciting news. For example, the one who just stood up and asked seriously, "Mr. Poplar Fruit, you are indeed very handsome. However, you are the youngest, but you are the leader of the 4-person translation team. Is there any inside story? According to the news on the internet, you have a very special relationship with this young and beautiful deputy editor, Ms. Zheng Yujia. Is this the reason?" This reporter and the one who was kicked out just now were very likely to be in cahoots, but this one was very cunning. Every time he said something groundless, it was as if he was just helping the netizens to ask questions. Some of the more unpleasant words, such as unspoken rules, were replaced by vague words such as inside story. Moreover, with his serious look, it was hard to classify him as a troublemaker. Even though he knew what was going on, Peng Yu couldn't find a suitable excuse, so he couldn't do anything. At this time it was up to Zheng Yujie and Poplar Fruit's ability to adapt. Zheng Yujie grabbed Poplar Fruit, who was about to respond, under the table. She turned the microphone in front of her, and said with a faint smile, "I can answer this question. The inside story you mentioned doesn't exist at all. Rumors are just rumors. Our translator selection session was held together with Ingyan Web, and every session was supervised by a notary. President Chun of Ingyan Web can testify for us." "That's right." Chun Fuzong, the president of Ingyan Web, nodded slightly and spoke into the microphone. "Thank you," Zheng Yujie said. "After many rounds of selection, we chose Poplar Fruit, Guan Yandian, and 3 others. Among them, Poplar Fruit is the best. Even the professors who were invited by Dongxin Publishing House to be the judges felt that Yonggua's translation skills were far better than ordinary literary translators. She was not on the same level as the other 3. Therefore, after some discussion, we decided to invite Poplar Fruit to be the team leader of the 4-person translation team. Before this, I've never met Yonggua. One of us is in the capital, and the other is in Yangcheng. We're thousands of miles apart. How could there be such a ridiculous rumor? That's too ridiculous." Zhang Yujie was a little agitated at the end, but she quickly calmed down and continued. It turns out that Poplar Fruit is very qualified to be the team leader. Not only is the quantity and quality of his translations far better than the other team members, but he can also take a lot of time to answer questions for the other team members and guide them to do better. What surprised us even more was that after his initial review, the translation was almost perfect. We organized a review team of more than 10 people, but they weren't as efficient as him. My colleagues in the review team were worried that if Poplar Fruit was hired by us, they would lose their jobs. The audience burst into laughter, and a few reporters even applauded. However, the reporter who caused trouble didn't give up. He continued to point his blade at Poplar Fruit. Mr. Poplar Fruit, since you are so outstanding, why didn't you choose to go to graduate school? Your major is English. Logically speaking, you should have no problem going to graduate school. However, among the 4 translation team members, you are the one with the lowest education level. This question was very sharp. Poplar Fruit held his breath and didn't know how to answer. This was because when he was in school, he wasn't as smart as he was now. At that time, it was impossible for him to go to graduate school. Therefore, he didn't take the risk of giving up his job to go to graduate school. Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and replied, At that time, I didn't have the intention to go to graduate school. I found a job and went to do it. Do you mean that as long as you want to, getting into graduate school is not difficult? The reporter asked with a twinkle in his eyes. He had been holding Poplar Fruit's transcript for a long time. This was obtained from the system through a person in the Academic Affairs Office of Higashiyama University. As long as Poplar Fruit gave a positive answer, he could use the headline second-rate translator boasting shamelessly, dares to say graduate school is a piece of cake, to stir up trouble. Peng Yu understood this kind of language trap as soon as she heard it. Who was she? What kind of insidious questions had she not seen before? She took the microphone and said, Okay, reporter, you have already asked 2 or 3 questions. You can take a break and leave this opportunity for others to ask questions, okay? Although it was a negotiation, she said it so firmly that there was no room for negotiation. The reporter sat down unwillingly, but Poplar Fruit did not intend to fool around with this question. He first nodded to Peng Yu to express his gratitude, then turned to look at the reporter and said seriously, The graduate school entrance examination is not a simple thing. I have never thought of it this way. However, I have always been confident in myself. I think that as long as I prepare with all my strength, whether it is me or the other candidates, we can all get the results we want. Even if he did not know what the reporter was up to, how could Poplar Fruit, who also wrote for a living, not be able to hear the trap in this question? Naturally, he would not act arrogant. His words were also very clever. He turned his confidence into encouragement for all the candidates and did not give the other party an excuse to create hype. However, this question did make Poplar Fruit think. Whether it was before working in a foreign trade company or now as a translator, he felt the importance of education. Taking the postgraduate entrance exam and studying for a postgraduate degree was no pressure for Yonggor at all. Since this was the case, why not spend some free time to take down this qualification that may be questioned by others? Poplar Fruit remembered that the application for the graduate school entrance examination did not close until the end of October. There were still a few days left. Could it be that he could take the last bus for this year's graduate school entrance examination? Poplar Fruit was multitasking and thought happily. Only Poplar Fruit dared and had the ability to multitask in this kind of situation. He did not know if Dongxin Publishing did something, but other than the 2 uncooperative reporters, the other reporters intentionally avoided Zhang Yujie. Poplar Fruit, who was very handsome and knowledgeable, gradually became the focus of the reporters. New questions came one after another. Mr. Poplar Fruit, there are rumors on the internet that your previous results were not very good, but as the largest company in Guangdong's translation industry, Xinda Corporation, evaluated you as their best translator. We are all very curious. How did you get to your current level? Can you share with us? A reporter asked. In fact, the rumors on the internet were that Poplar Fruit's previous results were very bad, but there was no evidence. But for the reporters, Whether it was good or bad was just a matter of mouth. This reporter, who had been bribed by Dongxin Publishing House, only changed a few words, and the effect of his words was much gentler. Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "My previous results were not very good. It was mainly because when I was in school, I was more playful and fell behind a lot of homework." His words were also half true. After all, he could not say that he did not know what he ate after graduation, and suddenly became a genius. The main change was this year. "I have my own child, a lovely little fairy," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. When talking about Kiki, his face was full of happiness. "As a father, I can't fool with life anymore." There was a bit of an uproar when the audience heard that he had a child at such a young age. But at this time, everyone saw his happy face and felt a little touched. "I started to think about earning more money, because in this way, I can give her better quality milk powder, buy her softer and more comfortable clothes, and let her live in a better environment. But in order to have more time to accompany her, I quit my foreign trade job that requires me to travel everywhere. I can only go back to my professional work, translation. Translation is not a very good job to earn money. Take Shinda Company as an example. They receive the least commission, but if you want to earn more, you have to be more outstanding," Poplar Fruit said with a little nostalgia. "So for my little fairy, I began to read the vocabulary books and translation theory books that used to make me sleepy. No matter how difficult it is, I have to force myself to work hard to be better. Fortunately, my memory is very good. Coupled with the fact that I am really devoted to learning, the speed of my progress is much faster than I thought. After a period of learning, I found that English is no longer a problem for me. I can easily read books in English, just like reading books in Chinese. There are no obstacles. So while trying to do some translation tasks, I continue to learn other people's translation cases and translation theories to enrich myself. President Yao of Shinda Company may think a little too highly of me, but I have indeed changed a lot compared to before. I will continue to work hard and strive to live up to President Yao's expectations of me." Poplar Fruit laughed. "But this also shows that as long as everyone is willing to devote themselves to something, then you will definitely do very well, even beyond your own imagination. Never underestimate yourself. You are far better than you think." This chapter is still purely boasting. Don't think that it is copied and pasted from somewhere, and don't think that it is a real translation theory. Insiders, please laugh it off. Chapter 103. The first question and answer session of the press conference ended in a happy atmosphere. Yanghua noticed that most of the reporters present were from official media, such as China Youth Daily, Beijing Daily, and so on. The questions they asked weren't as gossipy as the entertainment reporters. Naturally, they wouldn't ask tricky questions that put everyone on the spot. It seemed that the person who arranged this press conference was very skilled. Poplar Fruit sighed in his heart. He did not know if it was Zheng Yujia or someone else who was in charge. It was unlikely that it was Peng Yu. After all, he had a high status. The host did not let the atmosphere cool down. He joked around a bit and announced the start of the second segment. The second segment was a direct conversation with Professor Roland. The reason why Dongxin Publishing chose Professor Roland was because he was indeed an authoritative figure in the translation field. He had translated countless classics in his life, such as Milton's Paradise Lost, Paradise Restored, and Samson the Mighty, etc. He was also the vice president of the Beijing Translation Association. On the other hand, he was a translator who had received a lot of attention in the past 2 years. He had done a few episodes of talking about translation in a simple way on CCTV's popular lecture room program. He had done a thorough analysis of translation and was still talked about by people today. When Professor Roland stood up, the entire venue burst into thunderous applause. It was completely different from the treatment that Poplar Fruit received. Professor Roland stood up and nodded with a smile in response to everyone's enthusiasm. After the applause subsided, he picked up the microphone and said to all the reporters, "Thank you, everyone. I am very honored to be able to attend this press conference today." The reporters in the audience looked at him eagerly. They all knew that Professor Roland's habit of speaking was to first restrain himself and then restrain himself, or to put it another way, he liked to take a deep breath to whet everyone's appetite. He really did not feel comfortable talking about the cause and effect of a matter, because here, I am very likely to be able to personally witness, or rather let everyone witness, the rise of a rising star in the translation field. Professor Roland said with a smile. He looked at everyone's confused eyes and continued. You don't believe me? Let me tell you a secret. Although I did not participate in the translation of Steve Jobs' biography, a week ago, I was asked by Dongxin Publishing to help them with the final review of the book. After reading this book, I have to give a thumbs up to the translation of this book. Professor Roland reached out his left hand and gave a thumbs up. There were a few soft chuckles in the audience. Some people will say, Old man Roland, did you receive money to brag like this? Professor Luo Lin said. I can tell you that Professor Luo Lin has never received a single cent from anyone. In fact, this book is really well translated. It's the best translation I've seen in the market in the past 3 years. At one point, I even thought that some old guy in the translation industry couldn't stand the loneliness and came out to take on this job. But later, I realized that wasn't the case. So here, I have a question for Mr. Poplar Fruit. Professor Roland looked at Poplar Fruit with a smile. Poplar Fruit did not dare to be arrogant, and quickly stood up respectfully. I am looking through the translated works of the 4 of you. If I don't look carefully, it is indeed difficult to find a difference in the style of the entire book. I am very curious, how did you do it? Professor Roland once talked about it on the show. When he said look carefully, it was to the point of nitpicking. For a normal article, a teacher who studied linguistics to the point of perfection would be able to tell at a glance whether or not there was plagiarism. This was because there were too many flaws between the lines. Poplar Fruit said respectfully. Thank you for the compliment, Professor Roland. The main reason why the style is uniform is because I review the translations of the team members every day. If there is anything that is not good enough or does not conform to the style that everyone has agreed on, I will help them correct it. Of course, after this, I will also have a meeting with them to summarize the problems found in the day. We will make fewer mistakes every day. Slowly, everyone will have a better understanding of each other. You have a lot of work. Professor Roland sighed. Just now, Deputy Editor Zhang said that you translated the most out of everyone. As far as I know, the others combined might not even be as much as you. How did you manage to take care of so many things? You have to know that reviewing a book requires a lot of time and effort. Poplar Fruit obviously would not be so stupid as to tell everyone that he could only sleep 3 hours a day. He pondered for a moment, then smiled and said, It is okay. My translation speed is quite fast. Also, my memory is not bad. The entire book is imprinted in my mind and I remember the meaning. When I review a book, I only need to compare the information in my mind with the words. My speed is very fast. Professor Roland obviously did not come just to chat with Poplar Fruit. After chatting with Poplar Fruit for a while, he began to ask some professional questions to Poplar Fruit. Other than the translation theory, he also asked a lot of questions about Poplar Fruit's linguistic knowledge. Poplar Fruit answered very seriously. Many of the questions were very profound and were not knowledge that a graduate student could learn. If it were not for the fact that Poplar Fruit had read a lot of books and memorized a lot of obscure theories, he would have been tested by Professor Roland. Even so, Poplar Fruit still broke out in cold sweat. The more Professor Roland asked, the more excited he became. Poplar Fruit's fluency in answering questions aroused his curiosity. He really wanted to know the limits of this ridiculously young student in front of him. He had already forgotten all the requests that Pang Yu made when he invited him here. Poplar Fruit made him very satisfied. From the beginning of the conversation to the probing questions, the difficulty became higher and higher. Later on, the questions he asked were questions that even his own doctoral students might not be able to answer. However, Poplar Fruit was able to calmly answer them. If he did not think of the questions on the spot, Professor Roland would have suspected that this was all an act. At first, the reporters below the stage could still listen to the exchange between the two of them with great interest, but later on, They were all dumbfounded. Those theories could be understood if they were separated into individual words, but when they were put together, they were completely incomprehensible. However, even if they were confused, they were still convinced by Poplar Fruit. To be able to speak so confidently under Professor Rowland's difficult test, this showed that Poplar Fruit was not as useless as the internet said. A person who is educated will naturally be talented. This sentence was most suitable for Poplar Fruit. When he answered Professor Rowland's questions, the confident expression on his face gave people the illusion that Poplar Fruit was even better than Professor Rowland. Of course, they quickly overturned this ridiculous idea of theirs. Yes, how could Poplar Fruit, who was not famous at all, be better than Professor Rowland? However, they were certain of one thing, and that was that Poplar Fruit was indeed an excellent translator. Chapter 104. Professor Luolin did not continue to make things difficult for Yanghua. He stopped his slightly out-of-control examination and said with a smile, "Let's get back to the topic. After reading your translation, I have a question. It's about a small paragraph in the book." He turned to look at Peng Yu and said with a smile, "Chief Editor Peng, the book hasn't been officially published yet. I wonder if it's alright if I bring that short paragraph here to talk about it?" Peng Yu elegantly waved his hand and smiled. "Originally, it's not allowed to reveal the contents of the book, but since the Xiao Duan is fine, I'll approve it." Professor Luolin smiled slyly and looked at Poplar Fruit. "Poplar Fruit, you said before that you have an excellent memory. Do you still remember the farewell letter that Steve Jobs wrote to his wife?" How could Poplar Fruit not remember? The whole book was in his head. He asked. Teacher Luo should be referring to chapter 39, the middle section on page 487, right? Oh, that's right. Professor Luolin thought for a moment. He could only vaguely remember that it was the chapter that Poplar Fruit was talking about. As for whether it was page 487, he could not remember at all. However, this was not a big problem. He smiled and said, "Then can I trouble you to recite the original text in your translation?" Once this was said, the audience began to discuss. They all shook their heads and felt that it was impossible. Unless it was agreed upon beforehand, how could anyone remember a few hundred words out of 500,000 words? Professor Luolin took out a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to a reporter from Beijing Daily. He said, "Originally, I should be the one reading it out loud, but I came up with this little test on the spur of the moment. Now, I want this reporter to print out the original English text and Poplar Fruit's translation as witnesses. This is going to be interesting." The audience quieted down. All eyes were focused on Poplar Fruit, waiting to see how he would respond. However, Poplar Fruit was confident. He was not afraid at all. After all, his super memory was not for show. Poplar Fruit smiled. With his left hand behind his back and his right hand holding the microphone, he said with a nostalgic expression, "We? Underscore? Didn't know underscore much underscore about underscore each underscore other underscore 20 years underscore ago." Poplar Fruit's English was an American accent. It did not have the so-called Chinese accent that gave people a noble feeling. However, Yanggua's pronunciation was very pleasant to the ears. It was like a gentle breeze brushing against a willow tree, gentle and clear. Many of the reporters in the audience were fans of American dramas. This was the first time they heard Poplar Fruit speak English. They did not feel that it was out of place. It was just like watching an American drama. Although they could not understand without subtitles, they could still feel that Poplar Fruit's English pronunciation was not worse than an authentic American. After reading the farewell letter in English, Poplar Fruit smiled and started reading his translation. 20 years ago, we did not know much about each other. Intuition led us to meet each other. You made me fall head over heels for you. On the day of Avani's wedding, it was snowing. Many years later, the children came to report. We went through good times and bad, but there was never a day when we did not cherish each other. Our love and respect for each other grew and intensified with each passing day. We went through too many things together. Now we are back to the same place 20 years ago. As we grew older, our wisdom grew. Our faces and hearts were marked by time. We went through the joys, pains, secrets, and all kinds of wonderful things in life, but we are still together. I fell head over heels for you, and I still have not come back to my senses." The audience was silent. Poplar Fruit slowly put down the microphone. Only then did he hear the thunderous applause from the audience. This was the first time. The reporters gave him a round of applause. Of course, they were not impressed by Poplar Fruit's extraordinary memory. Perhaps they were impressed by the beautifully translated farewell letter. They were impressed by Steve Jobs' sincere love for his wife. At this time, the reporter who was holding the note exclaimed, "Poplar Fruit memorized it without missing a word." Unfortunately, no one paid attention to this matter. Whether Poplar Fruit was acting or could really memorize it, it was not important. The important thing was that through the translation of Poplar Fruit's farewell letter, everyone realized that the quality of Poplar Fruit's translation was really good. Professor Luo Lin asked the staff to type the farewell letter in both Chinese and English on the big screen. He laughed and commented on it, but he was not satisfied. Immediately after, he threw out a new question, a new bombshell. The translation of this farewell letter is indeed very simple. The words used are very common, but it also deeply shows Steve Jobs' love for his wife. "Poplar Fruit, your translation skills are really good," Professor Luo Lin said. Poplar Fruit was about to stand up to show modesty, but he waved his hand and tilted his head like an old urchin and said, "I still want to test you on the spot. Let's see if you can translate this in a more emotional way. Pay attention. I want a prose style. Isn't this too difficult? Impromptu translation on the spot? Or does he want prose?" Poplar Fruit was stunned. This professor is not honest, giving such a difficult question. Even the Ministry of Foreign Affairs translator might not be able to answer it, right? Poplar Fruit obviously would not give up so easily. The harder the question, the more Poplar Fruit's competitive spirit was aroused. He rested his chin on the microphone and pondered for less than 2 minutes. Then he looked up and calmly said, 20 years ago, we didn't know much about each other. We went where we wanted to go, where we wanted to go. You dazzled me, as if I were in the clouds. When we were married in Avani, snowflakes filled the sky. Time flies, the birth of our children, the good times, the hard times, are still fresh in our minds, and we have not experienced the hard times. Our love and respect for each other have been steeped and fermented through the years. We have weathered many storms together, and seen all the vicissitudes of the world. 20 years later, revisiting old places, we are older, wiser, and the marks of time have left wrinkles on our faces and hearts. We finally understand what the happiness, pain, secrets, and miracles of life mean. Because of this, we continue to live together hand in hand. As for me, who is in the clouds, my feet are the same as before, never stepping back into the world. Yang Guo's voice was like a feather falling from the sky, swaying people's hearts. This translation was really too beautiful. It could even be said that it was as beautiful as a painting. Listening to it, it was imprinted in people's hearts. If this was not lyrical prose, then what could be considered lyrical prose? Poplar Fruit's answer stunned the audience. Even the originator, Professor Rowling, was mesmerized by it. He even turned a deaf ear to the thunderous applause below the stage. He was still muttering to himself, savoring Poplar Fruit's impromptu translation. A reporter below the stage could not help but ask, "Mr. Poplar Fruit, I think your translation is even more beautiful than the previous one. Why did you choose that one? Why didn't you translate it better? We all saw it. You could have done it better." "That's right." The audience echoed one after another. Professor Rowling raised the microphone and smiled. "Let me answer this question for Poplar Fruit. Actually, Poplar Fruit has already told everyone the answer to this question. The ultimate goal of translation is to convey the message the author wants to convey to the reader. Sometimes, we don't pursue the best and most beautiful translation because this kind of translation is not the most suitable. It may not be able to convey the original meaning the author wants to convey. Everyone look at this article. This is Mr. Steve Jobs' farewell letter to his wife. Everyone knows Mr. Steve Jobs. He's a big entrepreneur and a leader in the science and technology industry. However, he has never been called a great writer. Can anyone expect him to write a brilliant article? That's obviously not realistic. Then let's think back. Poplar Fruit's lyrical prose. If I told you that this was written by Steve Jobs, would you believe me? Yes, when we translate this farewell letter, not only do we have to express the love Steve Jobs wants to convey to his wife, but we also have to translate Steve Jobs' style of writing. This way, our readers won't feel that it's too abrupt. So, of the two translations just now, even though the latter one is more touching, if you all calm down and think about it, you'll realize that the one that really resembles the book is the one that Yang will read first, said Professor Luo Lin with a straight face. After listening to his explanation, the reporters in the audience fell into deep thought. They all regained their calmness and carefully read it. Professor Rowling laughed and said, I've been the one asking all this time. Everyone might think that I've communicated with Poplar Fruit to deceive everyone. How about this? One of you can stand up and point out a literary genre for Poplar Fruit, and let him read this farewell letter again. How about that? Poplar Fruit was dizzy. This professor really can't stop playing. Doesn't he know that impromptu translation is a very taxing task? The audience was already bustling. Many people were eager to give it a try. On one hand, they really wanted to test Poplar Fruit. On the other hand, they also wanted to see if there were any other beautiful translations. In the end, a reporter from the Beijing Evening News came out on top. He stood up and said excitedly, I want Mr. Yang Guo to translate this farewell letter into a song poem. Song poem? Song poem. Are you sure your head didn't get squeezed by a door? Song poem. Poetry is one of the most difficult literary genres to translate in China. Although it's not translating poetry, translating a paragraph from English into Chinese and filling it in as a poem. Isn't this just tormenting people? But since Professor Rowling had already spoken, Poplar Fruit could only brace himself and do it. This time he thought for a long time, spending a full 5 minutes. Just as the host was worried that Poplar Fruit wouldn't be able to read it, and was about to smooth things over, Poplar Fruit suddenly raised his head. Poplar Fruit raised the microphone and smiled as he read. 20 years ago, before we knew each other, our love for each other lingered in our dreams. Hand in hand, white snow as a witness. Many years passed in the snap of a finger, before our knees. Sorrow and joy depend on each other, inseparable and unchanging. Love like a boulder, mutual respect and humility. 20 years of experience, I'm old and wise. Love is like the first time we met, but my hair is white and my face is covered with dust. Through trials and tribulations, I share joy with you, smiling with thousands of true meanings. In heaven and earth, my infatuation is always with you. Everyone in the room, including Professor Luo Lin, was stunned when they heard this. In ancient times, there was Chao Ji who wrote a poem in 7 steps. Today, there was Poplar Fruit who wrote a poem in 5 minutes. And it was translated. If it was said that everyone was just lamenting Poplar Fruit's quick thinking before, then now, everyone wanted to cut open Poplar Fruit to take a look. This was too monstrous. Chapter 105. After the press conference, the impatient Poplar Fruit did not wait for the reporters to leave. He excused himself from Pang Yu and the others and hurriedly left from the backstage. About 10 minutes ago, a staff member came over and handed him a note, saying that Kiki had woken up and was crying nonstop. At that moment, Poplar Fruit's heart flew away. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit's segment was over. After that, it was Pang Yu and Chen Fuzong from Ingyan Network to conclude. Otherwise, Poplar Fruit's answer would have been full of mistakes. Pang Yu and Chen Fuzong were still exchanging pleasantries. Zheng Yujie stood to the side absent-mindedly. Her eyes followed Poplar Fruit's back view as he left. She was a little reluctant to part with him. Poplar Fruit's performance earlier not only convinced the reporters, but even Zheng Yujie, who was sitting next to her, was mesmerized. As the saying goes, a scholar's temperament is a talent. The confident Poplar Fruit, who spoke with assurance, was outstanding even if he did not have a handsome appearance. As Pang Yu chatted, she caught a glimpse of Zheng Yujie's expression. She followed Zheng Yujie's gaze and happened to see Poplar Fruit's sleeve corner as he closed the door and left. She was experienced, so how could she not understand the subtlety of it? However, Pang Yu did not change her expression. She turned back and pretended that nothing had happened as she continued chatting with Chen Fuzong. She even smiled brightly from time to time. However, she sighed in her heart. Peng Yu and Zheng Yujia's mother were university classmates. It could be said that she had watched Zheng Yujia grow up. She knew Zheng Yujia's character very well. She was strong-minded and even a little rebellious. As long as she decided on something, even 10 mules would not be able to pull her back. If only Poplar Fruit didn't have a daughter. Peng Yu felt that it was a pity. She also thought highly of Poplar Fruit. At such a young age, he had already made great achievements in academics and translation. Moreover, he was tall and handsome. Not to mention Zheng Yujia. If she were 30 years younger, she would not be able to control herself. But so what? First of all, Poplar Fruit's background was mediocre. Even if he was handsome, he wouldn't be able to marry into a big family. What's more, Yanghua already had a child. Not to mention the big families that wanted to save face. Even if it was an ordinary family, they wouldn't be willing to marry their pure and innocent eldest daughter to him. So what if Zheng Yujia likes him? If this relationship continued, it would only be an ill-fated relationship. On the other hand, Poplar Fruit strode back to the side hall and opened the door. He thought that he would hear Kiki's earth-shattering cries, but he didn't. Poplar Fruit looked around and saw the assistant girl sitting in front of a wall-mounted TV with Kiki in her arms. Kiki was also watching with great interest. Poplar Fruit was stunned. Didn't they say that she was crying badly? Why wasn't there any movement at all? The sound of the door opening startled the assistant girl. She turned her head and saw Poplar Fruit. She quickly stood up. Kiki was still staring at the TV. Poplar Fruit looked at the TV carefully. It turned out that it was a video of his press conference. It could be seen in the side hall, and the assistant girl must have pressed the replay. Kiki. Poplar Fruit called softly. Kiki was stunned. She only reacted when Poplar Fruit called her a second time. She turned around and looked at Poplar Fruit in disbelief. Then she turned back to look at the TV. She finally confirmed that the person calling her now was her real father. Giggling, Kiki leaned her body towards her father and stretched out her arms. Poplar Fruit knew that Kiki wanted her father to hug her. Poplar Fruit's face also revealed a bright smile. He bent down slightly and hugged Kiki into his arms. The father and daughter's smiles complemented each other. It was as if the lights in the side hall dimmed a lot. The assistant girl smiled and said, "Just now the baby was crying nonstop. Coincidentally, your speech was playing on the TV. When she heard your voice, she quieted down." Poplar Fruit kissed his daughter and smiled at the assistant girl. Yes, when she woke up and didn't see me, she would make a fuss. But this is also the first time I know that she can still see me on the TV as her father by her side. Maybe the quality of our TV is too good. It has a 1080p super high definition screen and restores your voice and image. The assistant girl said mischievously as if she was selling advertisements. Poplar Fruit couldn't stop laughing. There was a banquet in the evening. Poplar Fruit carried his daughter and pushed the baby stroller back to prepare. He really didn't rest for a minute the whole day. Back at the hotel, he first gave Kiki a bath and put on the fragrant talcum powder. Then he fed her dinner. Poplar Fruit didn't go through so much trouble. He didn't even change his clothes. He just washed his face and carried his daughter out. The clothes Kiki wore today were bought by Zheng Yujia. It was a white pleated dress, and it was very beautiful. It was a sharp contrast with her father's black suit. They were like a princess and a prince. When they were about to walk out of the hotel, Chi-Chi's small hands wrapped around Yanggua's neck. Her small mouth exhaled a fragrant breath as she moved closer to his ear and muttered the words she had just learned. "Daddy." Poplar Fruit only felt his heart was filled with happiness. He kept walking, but the smile on his face betrayed his mood. Zheng Yujia didn't come to pick him up because she was too busy. So Poplar Fruit took a taxi to Quanjude. As a foodie who loved delicious food, Poplar Fruit had been admiring Beijing roast duck for a long time. It was just that he had never tried the authentic Quanjude roast duck. Quanjude could be said to be the origin of Quanjude. It had a history of more than 140 years. It could be said to be the most authentic of the authentic Quanjude. Looks like I am going to have a good meal today. Poplar Fruit thought happily. Although it had been through the baptism of wind and rain for more than 100 years, Kwanjud still retained its traditional style. It had green brick floors, a wooden attic, a black lacquered counter, and a square table. The shop assistants in green shirts and hats were enthusiastically cheering in the endless stream of people. The continuous and energetic Beijing dialect made people feel that this was the real essence of Beijing. Under the guidance of a shop assistant, Poplar Fruit arrived at the Swallow Cloud Pavilion on the 3rd floor. It was a big banquet hall. In the middle of the hall was a huge round table with a dozen seats. The table was decorated with solid wood armchairs, square tables, and blue and white porcelain vases. It was simple but majestic. When Poplar Fruit and Kiki appeared, other than Peng Yu and Chen Fuzong, Zheng Yujie and a few other people in charge were already present. They were sitting on the solid wood armchairs, drinking tea and chatting. When they saw Poplar Fruit, they happily greeted him. Today, Poplar Fruit had left a deep impression on them. Although the final result wasn't out yet, based on their experience, there was an 80% to 90% chance that they would win this battle. And this hero naturally had to be Poplar Fruit. However, Poplar Fruit wasn't the focus of everyone's attention. Little Kiki, who was dressed like a princess, attracted everyone's attention. She could be said to be attractive to both men and women. She was beautiful and cute. Everyone gathered around and affectionately played with Kiki, wanting to hug her. However, Kiki only responded with a smile. If any of the aunties reached out to hug her, she wouldn't be happy. Everyone could only give up. However, their love for Kiki didn't decrease. Yang Guo was tall and strong. Even in the north, where most people were tall, he stood out like a crane among chickens. He was a head taller than everyone else, so he immediately saw Zheng Yujie, who was standing at the back and not joining in the fun. He smiled and gave her a thumbs up. He mouthed to Zheng Yujie, "Thank you." Zheng Yujie looked at him with shining eyes. The corner of her mouth revealed a trace of a sweet smile. Peng Yu was the last to arrive. However, she was still with Chen Fuzong and Dongxin Publishing's big boss, the president. The president was a busy person. He usually didn't attend banquets between employees. Because Peng Yu said that today's press conference was very successful, he came over to toast everyone. Chen Fuzong left with the president. Peng Yu stayed behind. She always got along well with the editors under her, so even though she was there, the atmosphere suddenly became lively after the president and the others left. While waiting for the dishes to be served, Peng Yu chatted with everyone about recent interesting things. She even went to Poplar Fruit's side to look at little Kiki. Previously, when she met Poplar Fruit, she only caught a glimpse. This time, she saw clearly. The baby is so beautiful. Peng Yu couldn't help but praise in her heart. This child must have inherited all of Poplar Fruit's good points. Peng Yu thought in her heart. She was still in swaddling clothes, but she could already see that she was a beauty. What would happen when she grew up? Could it be Xiao Yu's child? Peng Yu just had this thought in her heart, but she immediately rejected it. Although Zheng Yujie frequently went abroad for business trips a few years ago, and she would be gone for several months at a time, she always paid attention. It was impossible for her to not have any clues when it came to giving birth to a child. However, Zheng Yujie actually fell in love with a man who already had a child. This was something that Peng Yu never expected. Didn't she always have her eyes on the top of her head? There were so many young masters in Beijing, but none of them could enter her eyes? Shouldn't it be easier to lose points if they had a child? Peng Yu really couldn't figure it out. When she first saw Poplar Fruit, she still had some misgivings. However, when she saw the innocent and cute little Kiki, she also threw this thought out of her mind. She could only say that Kiki's charm was simply too amazing. The fragrant Beijing roast duck was quickly served. Poplar Fruit was already drooling. There were more women present, so they couldn't drink anymore. Thus, under Peng Yu's instructions, everyone started to eat heartily. Kwanjud's roast duck was made by making a small hole in the duck's body. After removing the innards, they poured boiling water in. This way, the duck wouldn't be roasted dry. Furthermore, the roasted duck's skin was thin and crispy. When dipped in white sugar, it had a unique flavor. The most common way to eat Beijing roast duck was to use a thin layer of skin to roll up the duck in green onions, dip them in a sweet sauce, and then chew on them. When Poplar Fruit saw the others eating this way, he also followed suit. In the end, he was stimulated by the spiciness of the northern green onions, causing everyone to burst into laughter. Even Kiki, who didn't know the truth, also giggled. Even so, Poplar Fruit wouldn't back down. In front of delicious food, what was this little bit of spiciness? Chapter 106. There were still 2 days before the official release of Steve Jobs' biography. Poplar Fruit planned to bring Kiki around Beijing. Zheng Yujie originally wanted to be Poplar Fruit's tour guide, but she had no choice. She was the person in charge of the project and had a lot of decisions to make. She couldn't leave at the moment. Where should I go? In Beijing, Hohai and Sanliton's bar streets were very popular, but it wasn't convenient for him to bring his daughter along. Lulichang and Pan Garden were antique cities, and he didn't know anything about antiques, so there was no point in going. All the attractions were listed on the screen, and he might not be able to finish looking at them in 1 or 2 months. But Poplar Fruit felt that there was a place he couldn't not go. That was the Forbidden City of the Forbidden City. Beijing was the ancient capital of the 6 dynasties, and the Forbidden City was the palace of the 2 most recent feudal dynasties. It was the symbol of imperial power and the representative of ancient Chinese architecture. Thinking back to a few hundred years ago, when there were no large machinery and no advanced construction technology, on a vast land with a width of 750 meters from east to west and a length of 960 meters from north to south, an area of 720,000 square meters, there were more than 9,000 luxurious palaces symmetrically arranged along the central axis. What kind of miracle was this? Until today, it was still the focus of the world. How could he not go to such a place to pay his respects? Poplar Fruit thought that now that the National Day holiday had passed, and it wasn't a weekend, there shouldn't be too many people going to the Forbidden City at this time, right? After arriving, Poplar Fruit realized that he had taken it for granted. Even if it was a working day, there was still an endless stream of tourists coming to the Forbidden City. There were people from other places with different accents, and there were also blonde and blue-eyed foreign tourists. Poplar Fruit wasn't the only one who understood that the Forbidden City was the top tourist attraction in the world. How could tourists not come to Beijing to take a look? Even though there were a lot of people, it was still okay. It wasn't a sea of people. Today, Kiki was sitting in her father's arms. She was traveling with her father. She was wearing a white panda shirt and a matching hat. Her 2 black round ears looked very cute on the white hat. While Poplar Fruit was queuing up to buy tickets, Kiki couldn't help but look around, attracting the attention of many tourists. There were even 2 blonde beauties from America, who couldn't help but want to take a photo with Kiki. Poplar Fruit had no choice but to stand between them and make a peace sign with a stiff expression. After waiting in line for almost a quarter of an hour, they finally bought the tickets. Finally, they could enter this palace complex. Poplar Fruit calmed down his excitement and walked in through the gate of immortal martial arts with his arms around Kiki's belly. The gate of immortal martial arts belonged to the back door. After Poplar Fruit entered, the first thing he saw wasn't the huge palace, but the garden-style royal backyard, the Imperial Garden. The Imperial Garden was very different from the Suzhou Gardens in Jiangnan. It lacked a reserved delicateness. There were towering pines and cypresses, rare flowers and trees, and natural stones that looked like they were carefully carved. The pavilions and terraces spanned across the Lotus Pond and Blue Lake. Although it was quiet and serene, people who were in this place could feel a kind of indifferent atmosphere. Kiki liked beautiful places like the Imperial Garden, which had flowers and grass. She sat on Poplar Fruit's chest and looked at the beautiful scenery, happily clapping her little hands. When Poplar Fruit was about to leave, she pouted unhappily and kicked her legs. Her temper wasn't small. After passing through the Imperial Garden, there were all kinds of palaces of different sizes. Although it was still the inner court, the palaces here weren't small. There were Palace of Heavenly Purity, Jiaotai Palace, Palace of Earthly Tranquility, and so on. They were all familiar names from period dramas. However, perhaps because it was the living quarters of the royal family, there were all kinds of independent courtyards and gardens everywhere. After passing through the inner court, Poplar Fruit held up an umbrella. The main reason was to shelter Kiki from the sun. He couldn't just come to the capital and let his daughter become a little black pig. The style of the imperial palace in front of the Forbidden City was completely different from the inner court that Poplar Fruit had just seen. Its overall style was big and wide, tall and majestic. Time was limited, so Poplar Fruit couldn't leisurely stroll through the palaces one by one. He could only walk through each of the main halls. However, the shock in his heart couldn't stop. From afar, it was magnificent and majestic. From afar, it was magnificent and majestic. When he looked closer, it was classical, rich, and solemn. In the past, the Celestial Empire was so big and powerful. How did it fall to such a state? Although he only hurriedly passed by many of the palaces, Poplar Fruit didn't let go of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. This legendary Hall of the Golden Throne was an existence that was recorded in books, even in unofficial history. Not only was it the largest of all the palaces, its specifications were also the highest and most luxurious. Not to mention its 5 ridges and 4 slopes, just the 10 different shaped animal sculptures on the eaves were unique in the world. Poplar Fruit found the most interesting were the golden coiled dragon pillars beside the throne. They looked especially like the sea stabilizing needle in Journey to the West. He didn't know if Wu Qingjian had been inspired by these pillars. Many people mistakenly thought that the Hall of Supreme Harmony was the place where the emperor went to court every day. Poplar Fruit had done some research before coming. Actually, that wasn't the case. The Hall of Supreme Harmony was a place with the highest specifications used to hold important ceremonies, such as the emperor's wedding, birthday, and so on. Of course, the worship ceremony wasn't here. It was at the Huanqiu altar next to the Temple of Heaven. When one came to a scenic spot, the most important thing was to take pictures as a souvenir. Poplar Fruit, who was passionate about recording every detail of his and his daughter's life, naturally wouldn't forget. Other than taking a few pictures in the Imperial Garden and in front of the various palaces, Poplar Fruit even took a selfie of himself and Kiki with his iPhone in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Compared to asking tourists to help take pictures, Poplar Fruit was more confident in his photography skills. Especially after a few months of practice, Poplar Fruit had gradually mastered a unique selfie technique. No matter if it was serious or funny, he could easily hold it. Poplar Fruit couldn't get close to the dragon throne. He could only take pictures from afar. Even though there were many people, Poplar Fruit still cleverly used borrowed positions and unique angles. Not only did he not accidentally take a picture, but he also took the effect of the father and daughter sitting on the dragon throne and laughing. This was also thanks to the fact that the aperture of the iPhone wasn't too big, so it wouldn't cause the far-end blur effect due to focusing. After walking out of the Hall of Supreme Harmony, Poplar Fruit was still a little reluctant to leave. That was because the Forbidden City was almost one after another. There were many places in the Forbidden City that weren't open to tourists. Only the main palaces on the left and right of the central axis were open. If there was a chance, Poplar Fruit really wanted to walk around the entire Forbidden City. Walking around the Forbidden City took less than a morning. However, Poplar Fruit didn't plan to stay inside any longer. Because even if he could bear with the hunger, Kiki also wanted to drink milk. After playing for an entire morning, Kiki was also a little tired. After walking out of the Meridian Gate, they walked for a long time before finding a cafe that wasn't that crowded. After entering, Poplar Fruit realized the reason why there weren't so many people in this cafe. It was really too expensive. Ordinary latte coffee costs more than 200 yuan a cup. Ordinary tourists really couldn't afford it. The most expensive coffee Poplar Fruit had ever drunk in Yangcheng was at a foreign trade company. Once when he went out to meet a client, he treated the client to cat poop coffee at public expense. That was 288 yuan a cup, but that was cat poop coffee. That cafe's latte was only about 50 yuan. So what if it was expensive? Poplar Fruit didn't mind. He wasn't short of money now. Although he hadn't received any orders for the past 2 months, the book he read with Dongxin Publishing had earned him more than 100,000 renminbi. Furthermore, there were other miscellaneous rewards like translation team leader, book reviewer, etc. Compared to money, Poplar Fruit was more concerned about Kiki's peaceful and comfortable afternoon nap. These were all provided by this cafe. Poplar Fruit ordered a cup of Blue Mountain coffee, which cost 366 renminbi. He couldn't tell if it was authentic or not. He had read a rumor that the Blue Mountain coffee in Chinese cafes were all fake. But it didn't matter. He liked the Blue Mountain coffee's mellow taste and unique sour taste. Even if he couldn't afford to drink authentic Blue Mountain coffee, and he couldn't afford it, it's not bad to drink something less authentic. He ordered some snacks and a cup of hot water. The hot water was for Kiki to make milk powder. After Kiki finished the milk powder, she listened to the cafe's music for a while before falling asleep. After drinking the coffee, Yang Guo was in high spirits. However, he didn't want to walk around under the hot sun. He simply sat on the soft sofa in the coffee shop with one hand behind his head, and the other hand hugging Chi-Chi through the small quilt covering her body. He opened his eyes and didn't feel sleepy at all. He was just thinking about what he wanted to do in the near future. The translation of Steve Jobs' biography project was basically completed. Poplar Fruit should go back to be his own gold medal translator. Although Yao Dehua kept saying that it didn't matter, Poplar Fruit still felt that this big brother still needed him. If there wasn't a reliable and capable person, he wouldn't dare to easily entrust those urgent and important tasks to him. Yao Dehua had helped him a lot in this storm of public opinion. At least he didn't have to be so passive. In his hometown, there were still media outlets in Guangdong that spoke up for him. This kind of touching was beyond touching. This kind of kindness, he must find a chance to repay it. Secondly, his mother had called him many times, and the plan to go home was delayed again and again. This time, after the matter in Beijing was settled, he must go back to his hometown to accompany his parents. He hadn't been home for more than half a year. There was also the matter of his own postgraduate studies. No one knew his current situation better than Poplar Fruit. His ability had long left the postgraduate students in the dust. The postgraduate entrance examination was not a problem for him. The problem was, where should he apply for postgraduate studies? In a few days, this year's postgraduate entrance examination would be closed. Poplar Fruit didn't want to wait another year. It would be best if he could solve it tonight or tomorrow. Yang Guo didn't know why, but a slender and elegant figure standing by the lake suddenly flashed through his mind, and a smiling face as happy as a flower with Chi-Chi sticking close to each other. Shaking his head, Poplar Fruit scratched his head and ridiculed himself in his heart. But he also made up his mind. Since it was just to get a diploma and become a postgraduate student, why should he care about where he studied? Yes, that's the reason. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 107. Lying on the soft chair in the coffee shop and looking at the photos he took, Poplar Fruit suddenly laughed silently. This photo was really fun. It was in the Hall of Supreme Harmony. He was holding his left fist from afar. In the photo, it was as if he was holding a coiled dragon pillar. Kiki was grinning as she put one hand on her father's left arm, and the other hand was waving in the air. In the photo, it was as if she wanted to take the golden cudgel from her father's hand. That expression, that action, although it was a coincidence, it was really too realistic. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but now Poplar Fruit was overjoyed. He double-clicked to zoom in, and then zoomed out. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that it was interesting. There was Wi-Fi in the coffee shop. Poplar Fruit picked a few more interesting photos and posted them on Weibo. At that time, there was no ability to upload multiple photos at the same time. At around 4 in the afternoon, Kiki woke up. Poplar Fruit walked out of the coffee shop and walked around Tiananmen Square, while the sky was still bright. Other than taking photos and sighing about China's dominance, there wasn't much else in Tiananmen Square that was interesting. It was almost evening, and he still couldn't see the flag-raising ceremony. After walking for a day, Poplar Fruit still didn't feel tired. He didn't plan to call a taxi, because it was only a little more than a stop away from Wangfujing. He walked in that direction and prepared to find an old fried belly restaurant that he saw in the tourist brochure. After coming to Beijing, it was really too wasteful to stay in the hotel and eat the same food from all over the country. There were so many delicious snacks in Beijing. Even if he couldn't try every one of them, he still had to grab the opportunity to try. Everyone, use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to. On the way, he suddenly heard a few words in English. Actually, it wasn't strange to hear the English poplar fruit in Beijing. That was because there were too many foreign tourists in Beijing. He saw quite a few in the Forbidden City in the morning. However, poplar fruit could sense a sense of impatience and helplessness in these few sentences. Turning his head, he saw a thin middle-aged man with a beard and a Middle Eastern face standing in front of an old man wearing a red armband. He anxiously explained, "No, I'm asking about the washroom. Where is the washroom? P.S. Other than a few words, please use Chinese as much as possible for the dialogue below." "I'm Luan?" The old man was confused. "You're Luan?" Yes. The middle-aged foreigner nodded and then shook his head. No, is it the washroom?" The old man still did not understand. He asked again, "I am Luan?" "No, I'm not Luan." Helpless, the middle-aged foreigner changed his words and asked again, "Lavatory, where is the lavatory?" Not only was he desperately trying to explain, but he was also gesturing with his hands and feet to go to the lavatory. However, the old man was still confused. But when he saw the middle-aged foreigner's body language, he asked, "Are you talking about the toilet?" WZ. The foreigner had an American accent, and this well-known abbreviation had only been used in Yingjili. Almost no one had seen it in the United States. How could the middle-aged foreigner understand it? He thought the old man was talking about something else. No. The middle-aged foreigner was already very anxious. He squeezed his feet and scratched his ears and cheeks, thinking about how to explain the word toilet to the old man. Poplar Fruit looked at him and found it funny. The language barrier was indeed a big problem. A few years ago, when Beijing held the Olympic Games, almost everyone was learning English. Now the enthusiasm had faded. The question and answer between the old man who was in charge of street sanitation and the middle-aged foreigner in a special situation were not on the same channel at all. Poplar Fruit stepped forward and said to the middle-aged foreigner in English, "Hello, let me do it. Please wait a moment." He turned his head and said to the old man, "Uncle, this foreign friend is actually asking where the toilet is. Just point it out to him." The old man patted his thigh and laughed. "I told you I guessed right." He gestured that he wanted to go to the toilet and shook his head. "Young man, you're smart. You even know how to speak English." The old man talked for a long time, then pointed to an alley and said, "Follow this way. Go to the end and turn left. You'll see it." Poplar Fruit translated to the middle-aged foreigner. The muscles on his face finally relaxed. Because he was in a hurry to go to the toilet, he just hurriedly thanked Poplar Fruit, and then ran in that direction. It seemed that he had been holding it in for a long time. Shaking his head, Poplar Fruit turned back and thanked the warm-hearted old man with the armband. He then walked to the old store. He was now only a road away from the store. He could see the quaint signboard when he looked up. Poplar Fruit realized that no matter if the things they sold were new products, or if the interior decoration or service was very modern, as long as it was an old store, they liked to renovate the exterior of the store to have a contemporary feel. It was easy for customers to find because at a glance, they could tell that this was an old store with a long history. The food inside should be very authentic. It had to be said that this marketing strategy was quite successful. A group of customers lined up on the benches in front of the door was a good indication of the popularity of this place. Poplar Fruit was also in line. Suddenly he felt a pat on his shoulder. He looked back and saw that it was the middle-aged foreigner. He smiled happily and said, "So you're here. I've been looking for you for a long time." Poplar Fruit also smiled at him. "Thank you so much just now. Your help was very timely." The middle-aged foreigner grinned. His beard trembled with the muscles on his cheeks. "You're welcome." Poplar Fruit looked at him and smiled. "Actually, if you're asking for directions in China, it's best to find young people. They have received more English education." "Oh, I thought they were wearing this." The middle-aged foreigner gestured with his arm and traced the appearance of the armband. He said, "They're volunteers who serve the community. I heard from my friends that they came to China during the Olympic Games. The volunteers in China can speak English." Poplar Fruit smiled awkwardly. At that time, the entire capital was frantically learning English because of the National Olympic Games. Even the uncles and aunties could hum good morning. However, that was only a temporary popularity. After a few years, it went back to square one. It was funny when he thought about it. Poplar Fruit did not want to talk about this issue with him, so he changed the topic. Did you come here to try the fried tripe, a Chinese specialty food? Is it delicious? The middle-aged foreigner asked with great interest. I came to find you because I wanted to say thank you again. Also, I wanted to ask you, do you know how to get to the Laika Hotel? When he asked for a guest, his tone was very flat. It sounded like he was saying Laikuda. Poplar Fruit was a little confused at first. When he was about to say that he had just arrived in the capital and was not very familiar with it, the middle-aged foreigner took out his room key and room card. Here Laikuda Hotel. Poplar Fruit suddenly understood. He smiled and took out his room card. He waved it in front of the middle-aged foreigner and said, I know, I'm staying in the same hotel as you. That's great. We're really fated, the middle-aged foreigner said excitedly. Can you tell me how to get back? Poplar Fruit recalled the map he memorized before coming out to play. He realized that it was too complicated to explain to the middle-aged foreigner how to get a ride and transfer to the hotel. So he said, I'll go back after eating. Do you want to eat together and then leave together? This restaurant's fried tripe is very famous, and it's not pigs but lamb's fried tripe. Most of the Middle Eastern people were Muslim, so Poplar Fruit explained it to him. The middle-aged foreigner said happily, Can I? That's a great honor. I came to China not only to travel, but also to taste Chinese food. After waiting in line for more than 10 minutes, they finally waited until there was an empty seat. Poplar Fruit first ordered 2 signature dishes, belly gourd and belly powder dan. The middle-aged foreigner also ordered a few dishes that he thought should be delicious under Poplar Fruit's translation. The dishes were served quickly. In less than 3 minutes after the order was placed, plates of hot dishes were served. It smells so good, the middle-aged foreigner said with a thumbs up. Under Poplar Fruit's guidance, he began to learn how to use chopsticks. Seeing his 3 fingers awkwardly pinching the chopsticks and the tripe wobbling on the tip of the chopsticks, Poplar Fruit was especially worried that it would fall. Kiki was also attracted by the rich fragrance of the tripe. She began to dance restlessly in Poplar Fruit's arms. Poplar Fruit picked up a piece of lamb tripe and dipped it in the sauce. Kiki waited with her mouth open. In the end, when she saw her father stuffing the tripe into her mouth, Kiki waved her small hands and groaned in dissatisfaction. Her small body twisted to vent her discomfort. Your child wants to try it too. The middle-aged foreigner gestured to Poplar Fruit and smiled. Poplar Fruit said with a bitter smile, She likes the smell, but she can't eat it. She's not even a year old yet. The middle-aged foreigner nodded and smiled. She's so cute. Kiki was so noisy that Poplar Fruit could only put down the delicacies in front of him and think of a countermeasure. Poplar Fruit used the chopsticks to stir the soup in the bowl, letting the soup stain the chopsticks. Then, he stretched the chopsticks in front of Kiki's mouth. Poplar Fruit thought that since she couldn't eat the meat, it should be fine to try the soup. When Chi-Chi saw the chopsticks and smelled the scent that made her drool, she stopped twisting and turning. Her slightly red eyes also stopped the tears that were about to overflow. She sniffed at the chopsticks and then sucked on them. He thought that Chi-Chi would suck on it and refused to let it go, but Chi-Chi only sucked it for a moment before spitting it out in disgust. She even spat out the saliva in her mouth. Poplar Fruit was caught off guard. Kiki's saliva splashed onto her chin and the round collar of her clothes. Poplar Fruit was angry and amused at the same time. This little fool. He quickly pulled out a tissue and wiped Kiki clean. Poplar Fruit also understood the reason. The lamb tripe soup definitely had the fishy smell of sheep. It was not as fragrant and sweet as milk. It would be a miracle if Kiki liked it. After dealing with Chi-Chi, Yonghua turned around and chatted with the middle-aged foreign man while eating. By the way, sir, I still don't know how to call you. My name is Alan Adam. Chapter 108. My name is Alan Adam. You can call me Alan. The middle-aged foreign man laughed. Poplar Fruit nodded and smiled. Alan, hello. You can call me Leon. After that, Poplar Fruit suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and asked, Mr. Allen, how do you spell your name? It's Allen, A_L_L_E_N Adam. A_D_H_A_M. Allen gestured and said, Allen Adam. Poplar Fruit said twice in his mouth and finally connected the name with the person in his memory. However, he had only read relevant information before and had not seen photos, so he asked tentatively, Allen? Adam, are you one of the founders of Blizzard? Allen? Adam was also taken aback. He stopped awkwardly eating, raised his head and stared into Poplar Fruit's eyes. He frowned and asked, Who are you? How do you know me? Are you a reporter? Poplar Fruit pointed to himself and his daughter and smiled. Is there a reporter like me? He shook his head. Allen? Adam himself did not believe this inference because he was very low-key in front of the media, and since he quit the management work of Blizzard a few years ago, he had no more news exposure. If Poplar Fruit had planned everything and pretended to be so realistic just to interview him, then it was too realistic. Compared to that unreliable guess, he believed in his intuition more. Poplar Fruit was just a kind person he met on his journey. But how do you know about me? I'm not a big star? Allen Adam asked strangely. Haha. Poplar Fruit laughed. Allen, don't be nervous. I'm really not a reporter, nor am I a crazy fan of yours. Of course, I also admire your road to success. But I recognized you only because of my damn memory. I can memorize a lot of things I have read. For example, I used to read a report about Blizzard, so I remembered your name. I see. Allen Atkins smiled in relief. He struggled to pick up a piece of lamb's stomach and threw it into his mouth. While chewing, he said, Don't think of me as someone from Blizzard. The person sitting in front of you is just an ordinary Asian American. Haha, don't worry. Poplar Fruit laughed. I'm actually a translator. Poplar Fruit explained, because of my work, I read a lot of information, so I know more about it. No wonder your English is so good. Even better than mine. I thought you grew up in the United States, said Allen, who was relieved. Adhan joked. The two of them chatted as they ate. As they chatted, the topic gradually turned back to the game. Initially, Poplar Fruit talked to him about shooting games. Because many home consoles were unable to enter the Chinese market, many excellent games were unknown to the Chinese. However, when he recommended a game that everyone in China knew, Valve's Counter-Strike, Alan Kuroda was surprised. Atkins suddenly said in disdain, How can that be considered an excellent game? The truly excellent games are at Blizzard. Excellent games are created with great care. How can a poorly made game like Counter-Strike be considered excellent? Poplar Fruit knew that Counter-Strike's special effects were not as good as Blizzard's game. However, it was one of his favorite games. He argued, but Counter-Strike's game design is very good. Its gameplay principles and mini-maps are still being used by many games to this day. That can only be said to be a classic. It can't be said to be excellent. It wasn't excellent in the past, and it's even less so now. Atkin analyzed Counter-Strike for Poplar Fruit from the perspective of a game designer. Regardless of whether Poplar Fruit had thought of it before, Atkin listed more than 20 shortcomings of Counter-Strike and made Poplar Fruit speechless. Counter-Strike was outdated. That was an indisputable fact. As early as 5 or 6 years ago, Counter-Strike had been withdrawn from mainstream games. There was no place for it except in internet cafes and old players' computers. Younghua sighed. You're right. If a good game wants to last for a long time, it does take a long time to polish it. Games like Warcraft, StarCraft, and World of Warcraft are still popular after more than 10 years of development. They can't be separated from the efforts of the game developers behind them. Warcraft was Alan Kuroda's creation. Atkin launched it when he was still the CEO of Blizzard. At the time, he was stuck in the abysmal performance of Diablo. But when it came to Warcraft, Alan Garner was able to take over. However, Atkin made a beautiful comeback in Warcraft. This game was one of his prides. Therefore, when Poplar Fruit talked about Warcraft, Alan Kuroda's face lit up. When Atkin talked about Warcraft, a proud smile appeared on his face. Alan Kuroda was willing to give up his position as CEO and stay as a game consultant. Adkin had a passion for games that went beyond money and everything else. He didn't care what others thought of him, but he cared a lot about what others thought of his games. Poplar Fruit didn't forget to tease him towards the end. I finally understand why Blizzard is always jumping ship. I think you guys can't even get past your own hurdle, right? Alan Kuroda laughed. Adehan laughed heartily. Indeed, we only want to strive for perfection. Every time a new game or new version is released, it must have a breakthrough compared to the past and continue to be an outstanding work of art. If it's not good enough, we'd rather never release it to the market. I agree with your point of view. I think the same about my own translations. I won't allow it to be half-hearted. Poplar Fruit nodded seriously. But I have a question, Poplar Fruit asked. Blizzard released StarCraft 2 last year, but there hasn't been any updates for Warcraft. Is it because it's not good enough? But it's been 8 years since it was released. Just updating and maintaining the game's balance will not allow Warcraft to stay at the forefront of the era forever. Warcraft has always been the love and pain in the hearts of Warcraft fans. When it was released, it took the world by storm. The hero concept made it much more interesting and competitive than StarCraft. It was even one of the main events in the World Esports Championships. Unfortunately, in the hands of Blizzard, there hasn't been much change in the past 7 or 8 years. Only now did it gradually withdraw from the world stage. Recently, there have been rumors that Warcraft will be cancelled in the next WCG. How big of a regret is that? Speaking of this, Alan Kuroda's expression changed. Adkin's expression froze, and even his happy expression dimmed a little. He sighed slightly and said, "Sigh, it's not that. It's not that we don't want to release a new version. It's just that we can't find a better breakthrough point for this game. Even if we release a new version, it'll just be a rehash. It won't change much from the past." "Why didn't you buy Dota?" Poplar Fruit asked. Dota is based on Warcraft. The story is also based on Warcraft. It also has a huge player base. Why did you give up such an excellent game to Valve? Alan? Adhan raised his head and took a big gulp of tea. He slowly sighed and said with a bitter smile, "It's not that simple. There are a lot of conflicts of interest. Moreover, I'm not part of the management, so I can't make the decision. If it were me, I would never let go of Dota and leave." Although Alan? Adhan wasn't the main designer of Warcraft, that was Rob_Pardo. But he still treated Adhan like his own son, as if he had watched him grow up. How could he not be sad to see it gradually decline? "I really like Warcraft. Out of all the games released by Blizzard, I really like Warcraft," Poplar Fruit said bitterly. "I've always had a deep affection for it. When I first came across the Warcraft expansion pack, I thought it would be interesting, so I flipped through all the backstory novels, the Ancient War trilogy, and so on. I still remember Tyrion's words. Fordring said, 'Race doesn't mean glory. I've seen the noblest orcs, and the most despicable humans.'" Towards the end, the sadness turned into a faint nostalgia. Even the classic words in the backstory revealed a deep sense of nostalgia. "Alan?" Adhan also said with tears in his eyes. "This world no longer needs a guardian like me. The wounds of the earth will slowly recover by itself, and the future of the various races that live here can only depend on their own efforts." Poplar Fruit's eyes lit up and said, "The protector of Azeroth Mediv." "Alan?" Adhan smiled and nodded. "The scars of the world will slowly heal, but on this path, we are destined to walk an incomparably difficult path, whether the enemy is a stronger foreign enemy or ourselves." Poplar Fruit murmured, "Ian Alan?" Adhan looked at each other silently, then raised their heads and laughed, attracting the attention of the people around them. Those who didn't know would think that they were drunk. Chi-Chi didn't know why her father was so happy, and she didn't even know why there were tears at the corners of her father's eyes after laughing so hard. She turned her head and stared blankly at her father with her little mouth agape. It was unknown what she was thinking about as well. Although they had known each other for less than an hour, after this long chat, Alan, Adhan and Poplar Fruit felt like they had known each other for many years. The two of them resonated too much. Their understanding of Warcraft, their familiarity with the history of Warcraft, and their regret for the future of Warcraft were enough to turn them from strangers to good friends who could talk about anything. After returning to the hotel, Poplar Fruit said goodbye to Alan Adhen. He held his phone and lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling in a daze. He had already saved Alan Adhen's number on his phone, Adhen's contact information, but Yonggul was thinking about something else. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 109. After running up and down to buy Zheng Yujia's clothes, Poplar Fruit finally returned to the hotel. He walked to the door and took out the key. Poplar Fruit thought to himself, I've been out for so long. She can't still be in the bathroom, right? She's probably waiting anxiously. He opened the door and walked into the bedroom. Poplar Fruit saw that the bathroom door was wide open. There were a few puddles of water on the floor. Her wet clothes were thrown in the basin, but there was no one in the bathroom. Where is she? Poplar Fruit muttered to himself, full of doubts. However, the entire room was quiet. Kiki was still quietly lying in her own small bed sleeping. However, there was no trace of Zheng Yujia. She should still be here. Where could she have gone without wearing clothes? If it was in the past, she would definitely be in the room and chattering nonstop. Poplar Fruit sat down on the big bed and scratched his head. He took out his phone and was about to call Zheng Yujia. He raised his phone with his right hand and pressed his left hand on the quilt on the bed. What was that? Poplar Fruit was shocked. His left hand pressed down on something hard. Poplar Fruit moved his butt and lifted the quilt with his left hand. He saw a white and smooth foot. Lifting it up a little more, another foot was revealed. In the darkness of the bed, two beautiful legs that were intertwined with each other were faintly discernible. There was no need to look. Poplar Fruit knew that Zheng Yujia, who he couldn't find no matter how hard he tried, had crawled into his bed. However, he had made such a big move. Why didn't she react at all? Poplar Fruit moved to the front of the bed and gently lifted the quilt. He saw Zheng Yujia's face, which was sleeping like a child. Compared to when he first met her, she was a little thinner. It seemed that Zheng Yujia had been under a lot of pressure during this period of time. She didn't vent to anyone and just silently endured it. Seeing her sleeping so sweetly, Poplar Fruit hesitated for a moment and decided not to wake her up. It doesn't matter. I can change my clothes tomorrow, Poplar Fruit thought. Poplar Fruit's gaze involuntarily followed the lifted blanket downwards. Zheng Yujia's short hair couldn't cover her snow-white, smooth neck. What attracted Poplar Fruit's attention was Zheng Yujia's exquisite collarbone. Her round and delicate skin was like a rare treasure. Poplar Fruit had an impulse to carefully play with it. No. How can it be so evil? Poplar Fruit quickly shook his head and drove the evil thoughts out of his mind. If he really did this, he wouldn't be able to be friends in the future. Zheng Yujia's collarbone was wrapped in a white bathrobe. Although her curves were still very attractive, Poplar Fruit didn't continue to lift the blanket. He gently covered Zheng Yujia with the blanket, and then quietly pushed Kiki's small bed out. Poplar Fruit still had to feed and take care of Kiki at night. If Kiki cried, it would disturb Zheng Yujia's rest. It was better to do it in the living room. In any case, Poplar Fruit planned to sleep on the sofa tonight. It was a quiet night. The curtains were pulled open, and the room's floor-to-ceiling windows welcomed the bright morning sun without any obstruction. In the warmth of the sun, a figure moved and jumped. His arms were like an eagle flapping its wings, cutting the hazy sunlight into pieces. Kiki also woke up. She was half lying and half sitting in the baby stroller. She stared at the figure with her eyes wide open. Her small mouth formed an O shape. Her small hands were raised in the air, but she didn't move. Poplar Fruit stopped and deeply exhaled a long white breath. He walked out of the hologram and walked towards Kiki with a smile on his face. Kiki began to wave her small hands that she had been preparing for a long time. She grinned and said, "Ha ha ha ha." Her smile was even more sacred and beautiful than the morning sun. "Daddy, daddy." Kiki saw Poplar Fruit walk to her side. She stretched out her small hands and called out, "Hee, not yet." Poplar Fruit picked up the towel hanging on the baby stroller. He wiped his sweat and said with a smile, "Daddy is sweating so much right now. I can't carry you. If I carry you, you'll stink too. Kiki wrinkled her small nose at her father in dissatisfaction. Her small hands danced on her head and said, Dowdo. Poplar Fruit was stunned. Kiki began to learn words again? If he guessed correctly, Kiki was learning the word stink. Although the pronunciation was not standard, if Poplar Fruit said it a few more times, she would be able to say it. This made Poplar Fruit vigilant. In the future, he couldn't speak casually in front of his daughter. If Kiki inadvertently learned some of his vulgarities, then it wouldn't be cute. Poplar Fruit boiled a pot of water and prepared to make milk for Kiki when it cooled down. He brewed a pot of tea for himself. The tea was prepared by the hotel. It was oolong tea, and the taste was quite mellow. Poplar Fruit liked it very much. After drinking tea and resting for a while, Poplar Fruit felt that his body was sticky and uncomfortable. He also wanted to take a shower, but the bathroom was in the bedroom. If he took a shower, he would definitely disturb Wuxia. Poplar Fruit thought for a while. Anyway, it was time to wake Wuxia up for breakfast. She didn't eat dinner last night and slept soundly. She was probably very hungry now. Just like in Yangcheng, Poplar Fruit casually pushed open the bedroom door and walked in. He walked around the table and walked to the bed. Poplar Fruit inadvertently glanced at the bed. His eyes widened, and he accidentally bumped into the bedside table. Fortunately, his body was nimble and he managed to dodge in time without making too much noise. Poplar Fruit's brain was not working. He only felt the blood in his body boil. Half of it rushed down, while the other half rushed to his head. At this moment, on the bed, Wuxia was like an octopus wrapped around the blanket like a doll. Her sleeping posture was especially bold. However, this was not the reason why Poplar Fruit's soul was lost. Wuxia was wearing the hotel's bathrobe. The bathrobe was originally short, only covering a small part of her thighs. But with Wuxia's bare teeth and brandished claws while sleeping, the bottom of the bathrobe was pulled open by her thighs. Wuxia's full bum was exposed to the air. Wuxia's skin was really good. It was so smooth and tight that it was almost possible to pinch it until water came out. Poplar Fruit also saw something that he shouldn't have seen. In the place where his eyes stopped, a bright pink flower bloomed in a small black forest. However, there was no morning dew on it. Cough cough. Don't look at it. You shouldn't have seen it. A voice in his head kept warning Poplar Fruit. But he really couldn't move his legs. Although Poplar Fruit had a daughter, this was the first time he saw a real female body under conscious circumstances. Compared to the action movies in Japan and now, it was two completely different things. Plus, after having Kiki, he didn't think about the lower half of his body anymore. So when some heat accumulated for a long time, Poplar Fruit felt that his head was very hot. There was a burning liquid flowing from his nostrils. He reached out and touched it. It was all red nosebleeds. Poplar Fruit, you can't do this. Poplar Fruit pinched his thigh fiercely. How can you take advantage of me like this? Raising his head, Yonghua tiptoed and jumped out without making any sound. His movement could be said to be without leaving a trace behind. Gently closing the door, Poplar Fruit raised his head and covered his nose as he sat on the sofa. When Kiki saw her father's strange appearance, she was very happy and couldn't stop screaming. After being disturbed by Kiki's childish voice, Poplar Fruit slowly got rid of the exciting scene just now. Poplar Fruit reached out his clean hand, rubbed Kiki's little head and smiled. Kiki also took the opportunity to reach out her little hand to grab her father, and looked at him with her little nose. Because he had to wipe the nosebleeds, he didn't want to mess around with Kiki. Poplar Fruit carefully withdrew his hand, pulled 5 or 6 pieces of tissue from the table, and first wiped the nosebleeds that had stopped flowing out. Then he took out a new piece of tissue, wet it with cold water, and wiped the remaining blood stains. After checking several times in the mirror, Poplar Fruit was relieved. Don't worry, I've destroyed all the evidence. It won't be discovered. Poplar Fruit comforted himself. It seemed that he couldn't go in and wake Wuxia up again. Poplar Fruit changed his method. He directly knocked on the bedroom door and shouted, Wuxia, Wuxia, wake up. The wooden door was rumbling under Poplar Fruit's tremendous strength. Got it. Got it. No matter how deep in sleep Zheng Yujie was, she was still awakened by poplar fruit. She opened her sleepy eyes and propped herself up. Her hair was fluffy, and she shouted at the door, "Stop knocking on the door, it's so noisy." The loud noise of the door being torn down finally stopped, and Poplar Fruit's weak voice came from outside the door. "Well, the clothes I bought yesterday are on the table. Take them and change. I ordered breakfast. Come out and eat some after you wash up." "Got it. You're so annoying." Although she said that, Zheng Yujie's face was blooming with a smile. She was very happy with Poplar Fruit's thoughtfulness. Sitting up, Zheng Yujie looked at her exposed thighs and the messy bathrobe on them. She was stunned for a moment and quickly covered them up. She muttered in her heart. Poplar Fruit didn't see it, did he? Oh. Poplar Fruit is such a bad guy. Ugh, he's so ugly. Poplar Fruit, who was sitting upright on the sofa outside, inexplicably sneezed. He scratched his head in confusion. Did he catch a cold because he didn't change his clothes after exercising? No. Zheng Yujie, who was still sitting on the bed in the room, touched her beautiful thighs and made a charming expression. How could this blockhead see it? He doesn't even know how to eat meat that's sent to his mouth. A beautiful woman is lying on the bed almost naked, and he ran outside to sleep on the sofa. If he has the guts to come in and look, then he must have seen a ghost. There was a knock on the door, and Poplar Fruit's voice came in again. "Well, there was a bra yesterday. I didn't know your size, so I bought two. Try it on." "Got it." Zheng Yujie jumped out of bed, grabbed the clothes Poplar Fruit bought on the table, and ran to the bathroom to change. Running into the bathroom, Zheng Yujie looked up and saw that the big basin of clothes she changed out of last night had been washed clean and hung up to dry. Holding the clothes and covering her mouth, Zheng Yujie didn't know why, but big drops of tears jumped out from the corners of her eyes. They were like a flood that broke the dam and flowed into a river. My heart is obviously warm, so why am I crying? Zheng Yujie asked herself over and over again. In her memory, she had never seen a man who would wash a woman's clothes. Her father, who was in a high position, never did. He didn't even help her mother wash the dishes. It's him. Zheng Yujie shouted in her heart. It's him. If it's destined by the heavens, I won't change it until I die. Everyone, use your votes to buy the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 110. After increasing speed 6 times, the train became more and more comfortable, faster and faster, but it also lost the charm of the past. The clanking sound at the intersection of the tracks, the long whistle when the train entered the station and passed through the cave, the chimney that spewed out thick smoke like an old man smoking a hookah, the green train that once symbolized happiness and wandering into the future, the train that once ran over a poet who shouted, "Facing the sea, the spring flowers bloom," and the green train that once traversed the east, west, north, and south, but was gradually being eliminated, could only be left in the memories of the older generation. At most, it would appear in black and white documentaries. Poplar Fruit, who was immersed in memories and thoughts, was inexplicably sad, but Kiki, who didn't understand the world, was inexplicably very happy. Chi-Chi's big, sparkling eyes stared fixedly at the scenery flying by outside the window. Everything looked so fresh to her. Outside was a vast world, clean and clear blue sky, vast and boundless fields, and quiet rivers that flowed into the sea. Perhaps it was because she had lived in the concrete and steel forest for a long time. But now everything outside the window looked so close to nature and beautiful, although there were no goshawks flapping their wings, horses galloping, and flying fish swimming in the waves. The train passed through mountains and tunnels. After the darkness, suddenly light filled the entire carriage again, and the scenery was brand new again. Fish ponds, vegetable fields, banana trees, and sugarcane forests were all connected. The unique rural atmosphere of the Southern Kingdom was overwhelming. It was really beautiful. Following Kiki's gaze, Poplar Fruit also slowly smiled. Kiki liked the feeling of speed. The more she looked, the more excited she became. In the end, she laughed happily. Because it wasn't a holiday season, the train was empty. There were only the father and daughter in the soft seat carriage that Poplar Fruit bought. Poplar Fruit didn't have to worry about disturbing others. So Kiki's bell-like laughter echoed in the carriage. 2 minutes later, Kiki was laughing happily, and Poplar Fruit was also smiling. 5 minutes later, Kiki was still giggling, while Poplar Fruit could no longer laugh. 15 minutes later, Kiki was still laughing. Poplar Fruit covered his head, his face full of black lines. This little fairy's lung capacity was really high. Even after laughing for so long, there was still no sign of her stopping. They were now on a train heading to the small county town in their hometown. It had been a few days since he and Zheng Yujie had a romantic relationship in the hotel that Poplar Fruit might never mention. There wasn't much to be proud of that week. First, they followed the usual procedure and went through the drowsy book launch. The representative of the United States gave a speech, the president gave a speech, and the editor-in-chief gave a speech. The president and the representative of the United States unveiled the golden silk cloth covering Steve Jobs' biography, and everyone opened champagne to celebrate. Throughout the entire press conference, Poplar Fruit and Zheng Yujie, the two real protagonists, were smiling from the side. In the end, the muscles on their faces were stiff from smiling. If there was a small interlude, there really was one. Before the press conference began, many reporters surrounded Poplar Fruit. Some asked Poplar Fruit serious questions about the book's sales estimates, and some asked Poplar Fruit if he was interested in entering the entertainment industry. Poplar Fruit patiently answered them one by one. Poplar Fruit smiled at the questions thrown by the reporters who were more like entertainment reporters. "Sorry, I haven't considered it yet." Poplar Fruit really didn't want to enter the entertainment industry. This was his true thought. However, the next day's newspapers were different. The entertainment tabloids had big headlines that said, "The most handsome translator in history. Enter the entertainment industry? Anything is possible in the future." Of course, Poplar Fruit, who didn't care about this, didn't care either. What made his heart tremble was another reporter from the Beijing Daily. The reporter asked him, "Mr. Poplar Fruit, Professor Rowling is very optimistic about you. He promised on a program yesterday that as long as you apply for his master's degree, he'll accept you without any exam. What do you think of this matter?" When Yang Guo heard the news, he was very touched. His friendship with Professor Rowling was only limited to the last press conference where they had an exchange in front of everyone. In fact, the word exchange was more appropriate to describe it as an exchange of views. However, he didn't expect Professor Rowling to be so supportive of him. One had to know that a world-renowned professor, one of the top translators in the translation field, was offering an olive branch to a young translator that he didn't know much about. This was a very big deal. With his status, how many people came to ask for his advice every year? Of course, there were many famous translators among them. Even if Poplar Fruit stood among them, he would only be a chicken in a flock of cranes. Of all the people he could pick, why did he have to do the opposite and take the initiative to invite him? However, Poplar Fruit had already made his decision. Faced with this opportunity, which was like a pie falling from the sky, he said emotionally, "How can Poplar Fruit be valued by Professor Rowling?" Unfortunately, 2 days ago, Poplar Fruit signed up for this year's master's degree exam online. He signed up for Higashiyama University, which nurtured Poplar Fruit and deeply influenced Poplar Fruit's alma mater. Poplar Fruit can only apologize for Professor Rowling's kindness. Although I missed out on Professor Rowling's degree, Professor Rowling has always been Poplar Fruit's mentor and role model. If there is a chance in the future, Poplar Fruit will definitely learn from Professor Rowling. Poplar Fruit gave up on Beijing International Studies University, which was more famous and powerful in the field of translation, and chose to apply for his alma mater. This news caused quite a stir in the academic field. Even Poplar Fruit's alma mater was shocked. However, this was a story for another day. After the press conference, Zheng Yujie took Yang Guo to eat the best delicacies in Beijing for a day. What surprised Yang Guo was that these delicacies were not listed on the travel website, and were even hidden in the alleys and alleys of Beijing with a long history. There were not many tourists flocking over. Only the neighbors and old Beijing people warmly supporting them. After that, Poplar Fruit returned to Yangcheng. It had been a few days since he left Beijing. His house was about to rot. Poplar Fruit did not see Song Jiwen. He only stayed at home for a day before taking his daughter back to his hometown. It was indeed time to go back. Poplar Fruit did not return home for half a year after the Chinese New Year. Kiki was almost 7 months old. Poplar Fruit did not bring her back to see his father. His mom and dad had nagged him many times over the phone. He patted his daughter's head. This time, he was bringing her back to acknowledge her ancestors. Although Poplar Fruit did not get married and had a child, he did not plan to hide it. Kiki was his most precious person. How could he wrong his daughter on such a matter? Speaking of which, Kiki loved to see the scenery and the feeling of speed. Poplar Fruit began to ponder in his heart. Should he buy a car and bring Kiki out for a ride? Poplar Fruit actually had the idea of buying a car when he was sitting in the Maserati in Beijing. He did not want to buy a very expensive car. Cars like the Maserati and Aston Martin were luxury cars that cost tens of millions. Poplar Fruit could not afford them even if he sold himself. But for a man, how could he not want to have his own car? However, it was still too early. Kiki was too young. He could not carry her to the car. Moreover, he had not saved enough money to buy a good car. So he would think about this later. Kiki, who was high for more than half an hour, was finally tired. Poplar Fruit was afraid that her throat would be dry after screaming for so long. He quickly poured some warm water to feed her. Kiki drank half a bottle of water and fell asleep in her father's arms. Kiki fell asleep, but Poplar Fruit was very energetic. He looked at the window and felt a little bored. He rummaged through his carry-on bag. There was a book with a thickness of more than 200 pages lying quietly in it. It was an analysis of the ideological and political theory examination outline, the legendary political red treasure book that was necessary for the postgraduate entrance examination. He bought it at a roadside shop before he got on the car. Was he not going to take the postgraduate entrance examination? Poplar Fruit had checked that the English major he applied for had 4 subjects. There was no mathematics, comprehensive English, a second foreign language, linguistics, and the last subject was politics. Comprehensive English was no pressure for him now. Listening, reading, and writing, if he was stumped, he would be stripped of his title as a gold medal interpreter. He chose French as his second foreign language. Although he had a good grasp of other small languages like Spanish, Portuguese, German, and so on, French was his second foreign language course when he was in university. He could not be blamed for choosing it. There was nothing to prepare for this subject. As for linguistics, he had read more professional books in this area than some linguistics teachers. Poplar Fruit was confident that the postgraduate level exam would not be a problem for him. When he had time in the future, he would just do a few sets of questions to familiarize himself with them. The only thing that was a little unfamiliar was politics. After all, after his second year, Poplar Fruit had not come into contact with classes that he hated so much like Xixio and Ma Yuan. However, the national conditions of China were like this. Just because you did not like it did not mean that it did not exist. On the contrary, this kind of boring political theory would never stop. The postgraduate entrance examination. Such questions were absolutely indispensable. In order to take the postgraduate entrance examination, Poplar Fruit could only bite the bullet and gnaw on the hard and smelly political books like the other students. Therefore, before Poplar Fruit got on the train, he saw the book and bought it. He was bored on the way, so he could take a look. Rice could be eaten indiscriminately, but Poplar Fruit could not read indiscriminately. If he did, he would vomit blood. When other people were revising for the postgraduate entrance examination, they would wake up at the sound of the rooster and go to bed in the middle of the night. 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. They would work hard day and night. As for Poplar Fruit, he flipped through the book on the slightly swaying train. 1 hour, 2 hours, before 3 hours he had finished reading the book. Then he finished revising. Comparing oneself to others is infuriating. Everyone, use your votes to smash the poor. Greater than over equal to. Chapter 111. The train arrived at the small county's train station. From the train station to the small village, it took more than an hour to take a minibus. Poplar Fruit used a sling to carry Kiki in front of him. On his back, He carried a backpack that was as big as a hiking backpack. It was stuffed with all kinds of baby products for Kiki. Poplar Fruit's hands were not free either. He was pulling a big suitcase with one hand. During this trip to Beijing, Poplar Fruit bought a lot of gifts for his family. These gifts were enough to fill one suitcase. In the other suitcase there was a folded baby trolley, Poplar Fruit's clothes, Kiki's clothes, the office laptop, and so on. Young Guo was a freelancer now. She didn't have a fixed working time, but she also didn't have a clear break. Anyway, in her hometown, the nights were usually more boring. With a laptop, she could take on a few tasks to do. Although the weight of the two suitcases was nothing to Poplar Fruit, they were still very big. Therefore, Poplar Fruit felt very awkward dragging them. It took him a lot of effort to move them to the bus stop outside. After asking, Poplar Fruit found out that the nearest bus was still an hour away. He thought to himself, should I call a taxi? But looking at the two big suitcases in his hands, it was obvious that they could not fit. Then he could only wait. After he steadied himself, Poplar Fruit looked at his hometown carefully. Hey, I've become prettier? Youngwa couldn't believe her eyes as she looked around. In the past, the junction between the train station and the bus stop was filled with vendors. The dense crowd was walking in a hurry. Every day, they would leave behind a pile of paper. Near the corner of the wall, there were all kinds of small advertisements. The originally white wall was smeared with dirty water, garbage, and spray paint. The lower part of the wall was also stained with yellow stains. It was unknown which wicked person had secretly peed there. Of course, this was not a coincidence. It had been a long time since he came back. The place had been tidied up. There was no vomit-inducing garbage, no noisy peddlers, and even the walls had been repainted. The floor had been paved with bright tiles. Although it was not spotless, it was indeed difficult to find garbage that had been carelessly discarded on the ground. Because there were cleaners shuttling through the crowd at all times, once garbage was thrown down, it would not take long for it to be disposed of. The empty space on the street that was originally full of black cars was now a large service center. There were supermarkets, hotels, McDonald's, KFC, and a coffee shop that could only be found in big cities, Starbucks. The change in environment also affected people. Poplar Fruit remembered that even in public places, people in his hometown liked to talk at the top of their lungs. Those who did not understand Poplar Fruit's hometown dialect would think that they were quarreling. Old and young men liked to smoke hookahs. They could be seen smoking in the streets and alleys. That was how the smoky atmosphere at the train station came about. But now, Poplar Fruit saw men and women who were still dressed in rustic clothes. Their walking and talking had become very elegant. The women had become more reserved, and the men had become more gentlemanly. Of course, the hookahs that used to be the symbol of the small county no longer existed in this environment. Poplar Fruit heard from his dad that the county changed last year. It was said that he was transferred from a big city. He did not know if it was because of the new county magistrate, but his hometown had indeed become more beautiful. There was still an hour to go. Poplar Fruit was bored standing on the street, so he dragged his two big suitcases to Starbucks. Starbucks was not as popular as the two fast food restaurants next to it. The reason was obvious. Starbucks was expensive, and it was not something that the people in the small county could afford. Although it was changing, the change in nature still needed time, right? After ordering a cup of coffee, Poplar Fruit placed his backpack on the chair next to him, and then sat down comfortably. It's so comfortable, Poplar Fruit thought. He could sit down quietly in his hometown, listen to slow songs, and drink coffee. The irritability from waiting for the bus was gone. The staff in the cafe had good taste. The songs they played were not the wild songs that were most popular in the county. After listening to 3 songs, Poplar Fruit felt that they were not bad. There were Chinese and English songs, and they were all slow and sad or gentle and sweet love songs. They were quite suitable for an environment like the cafe. He did not know if the manager was a foreigner. If he was a local, Poplar Fruit would definitely give him or her a thumbs up. After another song, Poplar Fruit stood up and was about to call the waiter for a cup of coffee. Just as he inadvertently glanced out of the window, a figure happened to float by. Poplar Fruit held back the voice that was about to leave his mouth. So familiar. Was it her? Poplar Fruit stared blankly at the figure that had disappeared into the crowd. He looked in that direction for a long time, and did not want to sit down. That's not possible. How could she come to Poplar Fruit's hometown? She's not from here. Poplar Fruit questioned his eyes and his heart. However, her eyes were telling her that it was Lu Yunran. How could he be wrong? That was the person he loved deeply for 4 years. That back, that hairstyle, and that dress, everything was so familiar. Suddenly, Lu Yunran's whispers still lingered in his ears. But why? Why did he feel that she had really gone far away? Even though it had been less than half a year since they broke up, he actually felt that it had been a lifetime in the blink of an eye. She had indeed left. Because of his mistake, it was impossible to turn back. You know that. There was a voice in Poplar Fruit's heart that kept whispering. He sat down weakly. He had no intention of chasing after her. And he did not feel the heart-wrenching feeling when they had just broken up. Had he silently accepted this ending? Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly. He was not laughing at himself, but at the song that the shop played. Why was it so coincidental? Why was it so accurate? Wasn't it singing his own heart? Love at that time, why was it so simple? And why was it that when people were young, they had to hurt the person they loved deeply? In this similar late night, whether you are the same, are also quietly regretting and feeling sad. If we hadn't been so stubborn back then, now, we wouldn't be so regretful. This time, Poplar Fruit truly understood what kind of sadness milk tea was burying in the song Later. That's right. Later, I finally learned how to love. Unfortunately, you were already far away and disappeared in the sea of people. Poplar Fruit sang silently. Later, I finally understood in my tears that some people will no longer be together once they are missed. She did not want to cry anymore. She had already missed and would no longer be together. Their story would never be the same again. But once or forever, there was a boy who loved the girl deeply. The song ended and the crowd dispersed. Poplar Fruit retracted his gaze and smiled slightly. Chapter 112. The bus stopped and sped away. Poplar Fruit, Kiki, and a pile of luggage were left behind. Poplar Fruit stood at the entrance of the village, rubbing Kiki's little head, who had woken up and said with a smile, "Kiki, this is our hometown. You can see your grandparents in a while." A cement road had been built in the village a few years ago, but the road was full of weeds and a mixture of red soil and cow dung. In fact, this was also a kind of rustic simplicity. After being used to the hard asphalt roads and high-rise buildings in the city, returning to one's hometown made one feel like returning to nature. It was now the harvest season of the southern kingdom, and the air was full of the smell of autumn. The fragrance of flowers, rice, fruits, and the green grass steamed under the scorching sun. Behind the village entrance, a small village path was hidden in the dense shade of the trees. On such a small path, Yongwa didn't need to worry about Chi-Chi being exposed to the sun, even if he didn't use an umbrella. This was very good, because Yongwa didn't have the time to open an umbrella. Twisting his body and loosening his shoulders, Poplar Fruit was ready to drag the 2 big suitcases home. He did not tell anyone that he was coming back this time, because he wanted to give his parents a surprise. But the problem was that no one would come to pick him up. Poplar Fruit had to drag his luggage home, and it was 1 or 2 kilometers from the entrance of the village. Agua! Behind him came a shout full of energy, followed by the unique clattering sound of an ox cart. Looking back, it was Uncle Seven who had just come back with an ox cart. "Hey, Uncle Seven." Poplar Fruit greeted him happily. "It's really you." Seventh great uncle said with a smile. "I was worried that I might have mistaken you for someone else." Uncle Seven was in his 60s, almost 70 years old. At his age, he could still work in the fields, and his body was as strong as a young man's. But after all, age was unforgiving. Although his body was not old, his eyesight was a little blurry. If it was evening, without reading glasses he could not see at all. "Where? Uncle Seven, you are in good health," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "But I think that you should really enjoy yourself. Aren't your children working very well?" "You are persuading me again. Let me tell you, Uncle Seven, is not that I don't have children to take care of. I just can't be idle. If I don't do something every day, I will become rusty. Uncle Seven, sitting in the ox cart, laughed. When he got closer, Uncle Seven saw Kiki on Poplar Fruit's chest. Agua, who is this? Yours? Uncle Seven asked in disbelief. You guessed right, it's my daughter Yangluachi. Chichi, say hello to 7th great uncle. Yanggua put down the suitcase in her hand and lifted Chichi a little higher so that 7th great uncle could see more clearly. Kiki was not afraid. She looked at Uncle Seven and then looked at Daniel, who was pulling the cart. Daniel was Uncle Seven's treasure. He had raised him for 3 years. Every day, he would take him out to eat grass. Daniel's hair was shiny, and his muscles were coiled up. He was very strong, especially his 2 long horns. He looked like a fighter. Ordinary children would feel numb when they saw Daniel. They would shrink back and not dare to go forward, but Kiki was not an ordinary child. She was very happy when she saw Daniel. She wriggled and wanted to touch Daniel. From time to time, she would turn her head to greet her father. She pointed at Daniel and asked Poplar Fruit to come closer. Poplar Fruit saw her and laughed. Kiki, don't make trouble. That is Daniel. Be careful of his temper. Uncle Seven laughed and said, Agua, you are not even a child. Let her come closer to Daniel. What are you afraid of? I am not bragging, but Daniel's temper is the best in the village. Don't worry, I will watch. Since Uncle Seven said so, Poplar Fruit went over with Kiki in his arms. He was still worried. He was still holding back his strength in his right hand. He was worried that Daniel would suddenly not cooperate. He could still stop him. However, Poplar Fruit worried too much. Daniel was very docile. He looked at Kiki gently as if he was looking at his own child. In order to let Kiki feel him, Daniel lowered his head and tilted his horns to the ground. Kiki's small hand gently slid across Daniel's forehead. The hair there was very compact, but it was also very clean. Kiki was still not satisfied. She grabbed Daniel's horns with both hands. Poplar Fruit was shocked. He was worried that Daniel would explode, so he quickly pressed one hand on Daniel's horns. However, he did not feel any strength. Kiki, who was satisfied, giggled. Daniel slowly raised his head and looked at Kiki with his big eyes. He rolled his tongue and snorted happily. You are an interesting child. Uncle Seven squinted his eyes and smiled. Agua, did you leave without saying goodbye this time? Uncle Seven said politely. Poplar Fruit remembered that Uncle Seven did not study. He did not know if it was because his sons had installed a TV at home these few years. He probably learned some new words from watching TV. Haha, yes, I wanted to give my parents a surprise. Poplar Fruit laughed. Then come up. Uncle Seven will drive you back. Look at the big and small bags you brought. Uncle Seven patted the ox cart and said, Don't tell me that after going to a big city, you don't even dare to sit on Uncle Seven's ox cart? How could that be? Thank you, Uncle Seven. Poplar Fruit was not polite. He carried the 2 suitcases and stuffed them into the ox cart. Then he lifted his leg and boarded the ox cart. Let's go. Uncle Seven patted Daniel's butt. Daniel understood and walked forward. Although it was slow, it was more leisurely. That kind of fun was not comparable to modern transportation. Sitting in the front, Uncle Seven began to hum a little tune while holding the ox rope. The tune that Uncle Seven was humming was a dialect drama from Poplar Fruit's hometown. There was nothing praiseworthy about the general content. It was nothing more than the plot of a county magistrate who could not resolve a dispute between neighbors. However, when it was sung in the local dialect, the rough lines had a different charm in the euphemistic tune. Indeed, it could be said that it was behind the times, but it had to be said that it was very interesting to listen to occasionally. Kiki liked it very much. She listened very seriously and even shook her head. She was very much like the old opera fans in the tea houses of the old era in the capital. Poplar Fruit laughed and patted her little head. He did not know if Kiki understood it, but she was indeed very talented in music. She seemed to be able to distinguish the rhythm of the song. She was not like her father, Poplar Fruit, who was born unable to distinguish the tune of a song. Perhaps she inherited it from her mother. 2 kilometers was not close, but it was not far either. Poplar Fruit could already see his own courtyard from afar. Because Uncle Seven's house still had to go downhill, Poplar Fruit thanked Uncle Seven for his kindness and got off the ox cart at the intersection. "Okay, then you can walk back by yourself," Uncle Seven said. "It's okay, Uncle Seven, don't worry." Poplar Fruit smiled and said, "Thank you for today. I just came back tonight, so I didn't prepare anything. But tomorrow, don't make a fire in your house. Come to my house for dinner. At that time, the two of us can have a chat." "Okay, I'll go tomorrow and see your child. I think I have an affinity with this child." Haha. Uncle Seven laughed and drove the ox cart home. In Poplar Fruit's house, Fu, the Chinese rural dog, which was an ordinary big yellow dog, began to wander back and forth in front of the courtyard, wagging its tail and barking nonstop. Poplar Fruit's mother, Su Jinfeng, was feeding her grandson Yang Lingjie lunch in the hall. Hearing the noise, she nudged Poplar Fruit's father, Yang Tai, and said, "Old man, go and see what's going on. Fu is barking so loudly." "What can it be?" Yang Tai sat on a bamboo chair in the hall and leisurely fanned himself. He said lazily, "It's uncomfortable if it doesn't bark every day." "How can it be the same?" Su Jinfeng kicked him again. "Usually, when someone walks by, Fu will just make a fuss and not bark. This time it's abnormal. Could it be that someone is coming? Who would come on such a hot day?" Yang Tai was too lazy to move. He squinted his eyes and said faintly. There was even a few snoring sounds coming from his nose. "Are you going or not?" Su Jinfeng couldn't stand Yang Tai's lazy appearance the most. She directly stuffed her foot under his butt and stored up her strength. If he didn't get up, she was going to kick him down. His wife was angry, so Yang Tai didn't dare to continue enjoying his afternoon nap. He struggled to sit up and said discontentedly, "At this time, the people in the village are either working in the fields or hiding at home. Who would come in the afternoon sun?" However, Fu's barking didn't stop. Yang Tai also stood up and prepared to go out to see what was going on. Su Jinfeng frowned and said, "Could it be that Guozi is back? Have you gone crazy from missing your son?" Yang Tai pulled on his slippers and turned around to sneer. "Didn't Guozi call a few days ago? He's on a business trip in Beijing. Why would he come back? You men only know how to go on business trips all day. You don't care about your home at all. Guozi is right. How old is little Kiki? She's not even a year old. And he's already running around. Beijing is so chaotic. What if Kiki is taken away by someone?" Su Jinfeng said with a bitter face. "Women are always thinking about useless things." Yang Tai said, "I know what kind of person Guozi is. Even outside, my granddaughter is taken care of by him. Nothing will happen. Furthermore, Guozi is going to Beijing for some meeting. He's going to do something big. Our old Yang family finally has someone who can stand out. Aren't you happy?" Yang Tai added. "That's not what I meant." Su Jinfeng frowned as she stood at the entrance of the hall and said unhappily. While they were arguing, Yang Tai had already walked to the door. He used his foot to chase away Fu, who was wagging his tail, and opened the door. The large iron door creaked open. Their son Poplar Fruit, who they were just talking about, was standing at the door with a box in his hand. Poplar Fruit and Kiki, who was sitting on his chest, were looking at them with a smile. Chapter 113. The old couple couldn't believe it and stood there in a daze. Instead, it was Yang Lingjie, who was only 3 years old, who reacted first. "Uncle!" Yang Lingjie shouted happily. He came out from behind his grandmother, Su Jinfeng, and wanted to rush to Poplar Fruit. Su Jinfeng quickly stopped him, pointed at the porridge on his face and said, "It's dirty, don't smear it on your uncle." "Dad, Mom." Poplar Fruit laughed heartily. "I'm back." "It's good that you're back, it's good that you're back." Su Jinfeng's wrinkled face was full of smiles. She pushed Yang Tai, who was standing there stupidly, and said, "Why are you still standing there? Hurry up and help our son move his things in." At this time, Yang Tai woke up from the surprise. He didn't know how to express his feelings. He rubbed his hands and felt that they were dirty, so he quickly wiped them on his body. As he walked to his son, he repeatedly said, Okay. Dad, it's okay. You just rest. I can do it alone. Poplar Fruit didn't want Yang Tai to help him carry his things. He dragged the two big suitcases and squeezed Yang Tai, who came to help, into the yard. It's a little dirty. Yang Tai didn't help. He moved a bench and put it on the cement floor under the eaves. He pointed to the yard and said, the yard at home wasn't covered with cement, and it was still a large piece of soil. Although they hadn't farmed in the past 2 years, they still raised cattle, so the place next to the cattle pen was full of grass and cow dung. It did look a little dirty. However, Poplar Fruit grew up on this land. How could he care about this? He carried the two big suitcases on the cement floor, one in each hand, and then clapped his hands and said with a smile, Dad, do you need to do this? I'm not afraid of being dirty. He's just afraid that you're used to living in the city and not used to living in the countryside. Su Jinfeng said. But I say, our son was born and raised in the countryside. How could he forget his roots when he went to the city? Isn't it just a little bit of soil? Is it as hard as we used to be? Exactly. Poplar Fruit smiled in agreement. Dad, just sit down and rest. I'm home, not a guest. I don't need your help. Good. Yang Tai smiled and sat down on his bamboo chair. However, before he could sit properly, he stood up again and approached Poplar Fruit. He looked at Kiki and said, Is this young Luochi? Poplar Fruit hurriedly unloaded the big bag on his back and put it on the bench. Then he carried Kiki out of the straps and carried her in front of his father. He said, Yes, Kiki, this is Grandpa. Quick, call him Grandpa. Grandpa. Poplar Fruit knew that his attempt was futile, because he had never taught Kiki how to call her grandparents. However, he still gave it a try. Kiki, of course, didn't understand what her father was calling her. She was just carried by her father's two big hands with a blank face. Her eyes rolled around as she looked at the stranger in front of her. She rubbed her calves to show her doubts. Good. Yang Tai smiled until the crow's feet at the corner of his eyes rose to his forehead. He was about to take Kiki when Su Jinfeng, who had just put the bowl in the kitchen, saw them and exclaimed in a flustered and exasperated manner, Old man, be careful. You farmer, don't be so careless. Don't let little Kiki fall. Su Jinfeng rushed to their side and looked at Yang Tai with a worried expression as he carried Kiki. She was worried that Kiki would fall. How can that be? Didn't I also carry little Ping and Fruit when they were young? Yang Tai said unhappily as he carried Kiki. That's because you were young. 10 or 20 years have passed. Count yourself. How old are you now? You've been a farmer for so many years, and all your strength has been spent on the land. What do you know about carrying a child? Su Jinfeng nagged. Hearing the last word, Poplar Fruit quickly reached out and covered Kiki's ears. He whispered to his mother, Mom, stop arguing with Dad. Don't swear in front of Kiki. She's a fast learner now. Originally, Kiki was a little unwilling to be carried by her grandfather. Now that her father was covering her face, Kiki started to struggle unhappily. Poplar Fruit then put his hand down. That can't be? Su Jinfeng said in disbelief. How many months has Kiki been? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Taking everything into account, it's only been 6 months. She's already learned how to speak? When you were 1 year old, you didn't even know how to call Mom. Why would I lie to you? Poplar Fruit laughed. Let me demonstrate for you too. Poplar Fruit did as he said. He lowered his body and leaned into his father's embrace. His finger hooked Kiki's little nose. He smiled and said, Kiki, quick, call Dad. Dad. Kiki's originally unhappy mood was immediately swept away by her father's intimate action. She opened her little mouth and laughed. After hearing her father's second signal, Kiki called out loudly, Dad. Good girl. Poplar Fruit rubbed Kiki's little nose again. Su Jinfeng grabbed his hand and said, What are you doing? Don't keep touching little Kiki's nose. If you keep moving it, it'll become a flat nose in the future. You're exaggerating, right? Poplar Fruit said in disbelief. You've been holding her for so long. Let me hold her. Su Jinfeng reached out and said to Yang Tai. Yang Tai was dissatisfied. He muttered, I've only been holding her for a short while. How is that long? He hugged Kiki and avoided Su Jinfeng's arms, refusing to give her. Are you going to give her to you or not? You. Su Jinfeng put her hands on her waist and said angrily, "You're a big man. Do you know how to hold a child? Can't you see that little Kiki is very uncomfortable in your arms?" Yang Tai had no choice but to transfer the right to hold his granddaughter. Su Jinfeng hugged Kiki and said proudly, "Grandma loves my little Kiki the most. Yesterday, I don't know who was the one who said that he had no grandchild to hold. No grandchild to hold. I think you're a feudal old man in the old society. What era is it now? You still have the mindset of valuing boys over girls." At this time, Poplar Fruit looked at Yang Tai in confusion. This won't do. Kiki was the most important person in Poplar Fruit's heart. If his father thought this way, he would have to have a good talk with his father. Otherwise, wouldn't Kiki be wronged in the future? That's not what I meant. Yang Tai said stubbornly. I didn't say that I don't like granddaughters. I'm just saying that with fruit like this, it won't be easy for him to find a pure girl to be his wife. If he has a child, who would want to marry him? Without a wife, he won't have a son. Without a son, my young family won't have a grandson to carry on the family line. In the end, it was still the same meaning. Poplar Fruit didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The Mid-Autumn Festival is here. I wish everyone a happy Mid-Autumn Festival. Chapter 114. Perhaps due to the underdevelopment of transportation and information, Poplar Fruit's hometown was still heavily influenced by feudalism. Even in the second decade of the 21st century, the concept of carrying on the family line was still deeply rooted. Yang Tai was not well educated, and he was a farmer with his back facing the sky. He was more concerned about the issue of family inheritance. In his mind, Poplar Fruit was the hope of carrying on his bloodline. However, Poplar Fruit had not married yet, and he already had a child. Moreover, it was a girl. How could he not feel anxious? However, he also knew that times were different. Television always talked about changing one's mindset, so he was not willing to show that kind of thought. He hid it, but the knot in his heart was difficult to eliminate. His son had not come back, and he was worried that he might not be able to hide his thoughts and not be nice to his little granddaughter. He kept telling himself to restrain himself. However, to his surprise, when he saw Kiki's cute little face, Yang Tai felt as if he saw Poplar Fruit and Yang Ping when they were young. His heart softened, and he could no longer bring up any thoughts of discrimination. When he hugged Kiki, Yang Tai was even more gratified. The smile on his face came from the bottom of his heart. Where did the word restrain come from? There was no need to restrain himself at all. Dad. Poplar Fruit pulled Yang Tai aside. He was afraid that Kiki would hear him, so he whispered, "What time is it now? Why are you still thinking like this?" "I'm not." Yang Tai wiped his clothes with his palms and said unhappily. "Whether you are or not," Poplar Fruit emphasized, "Kiki is your granddaughter. She is your son's child. She is the next generation of our Yang family. It doesn't matter if she is a boy or a girl. What matters is that our family can live happily. That's enough. I don't want you to worry too much. It's not like your son can't make a living and has nothing to eat. Your son is becoming more and more promising. The money he earns in a month is more than what you can earn in 10 years of hard work. So, you don't have to worry that your son can't find a wife. When fate comes, a wife will come," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "But," Yang Tai grabbed Poplar Fruit's arm and said, "Won't the girl care that you have a daughter? The premise is that she has to accept and even like Kiki." Poplar Fruit patted his father's calloused hand and smiled. "And Kiki has to like her. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to step into our house. Don't think that it's impossible." Poplar Fruit raised his hand to stop Yang Tai, who was about to speak, and said, "There are still many good girls in the world. Your son is not bad. He will definitely find one. You can rest assured." Yang Tai couldn't find a reason to refute, so he let out a long sigh and faintly said, "All right, take care of yourself. Dad can't help you much, so you have to rely on yourself in the future. But little Kiki, you don't have to worry that Dad won't like her. Dad can't wait to see her. Look at your mother, She won't let go of her. You can talk to her later. Poplar Fruit laughed and said, That's none of my business. You have to talk to Mom yourself. Talk about what? Su Jinfeng asked curiously. Nothing. Yang Tai didn't dare to say, so he replied unhappily. Look at your son. You haven't seen him for half a year. Don't you feel that he has changed a lot? Su Jinfeng chuckled. Yang Tai, who was careless, finally paid attention. He carefully looked at his son. Originally, Poplar Fruit was a little taller than him. Now he realized that Poplar Fruit was more than a head taller than him. Even that face was much clearer than before. When a man looked at another man, he usually wouldn't pay attention to whether the other man was handsome or very handsome. At most, he would think that the other man was a little better looking. As for how much was a little, he didn't care. And Yang Tai wouldn't use such a fashionable word like handsome. When talking about good looks in the countryside, no matter if it was a man or a woman, they would say that they were very good looking. If it wasn't for Poplar Fruit's actions and voice being the same as before, Yang Tai would have suspected that his son had been swapped. But how could there be such a big change in half a year? Yang Tai expressed his doubts. Su Jinfeng also agreed. Yeah, I think it's strange too. Poplar Fruit scratched his head and said, Maybe it's because I've been exercising more. I recently learned a set of boxing from a master. Practicing every day might have stimulated my third puberty. Poplar Fruit didn't know what was going on. He tried to find the reason himself, but he could only forcefully link it to his own boxing. The origin of the boxing naturally couldn't be told. Poplar Fruit just made up a master. Su Jinfeng and Yang Tai weren't human researchers. They didn't doubt this reason, and they weren't interested in getting to the bottom of it. And at this time, they met with another problem. As soon as Kiki came back, she attracted the attention of Su Jinfeng and Yang Tai. The whole family surrounded her. The little nephew, Yang Lingjie, who was originally the most favored in the family, couldn't stand it. This treatment was originally for him alone. How could he be neglected when a little sister came? Yang Lingjie was still very active when Poplar Fruit came in. Every time his uncle came back, he would bring delicious food for him. Even when he saw Kiki, he was very curious and came over to take a look. But later, he found that his sense of existence had fallen to the bottom, so he stood aside unhappily. Su Jinfeng hugged Kiki for a long time. Yang Lingjie finally couldn't stand it anymore. He walked forward and hugged Su Jinfeng's leg. He said vaguely, Grandma, I want to hug too. Okay. Wait a while. Su Jinfeng didn't care and said casually, No, I want to hug now. Yang Lingjie said unwillingly, You can't hug now. Grandma is hugging the little sister. Su Jinfeng explained. Woo, I want Grandma to hug me. Grandma, hug me. Feeling wronged, Yang Lingjie started to cry. He tugged at Su Jinfeng's trousers and shook them, refusing to give up. After crying twice, he sat on the ground and made a scene. But the ground was full of dirt and grass. Poplar Fruit's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He rushed over and hugged Yang Lingjie, who almost rolled to the ground. Little Jia, why are you crying? Can you tell Uncle? Poplar Fruit patted the crying Yang Lingjie's back and comforted him. Woo, Grandma won't hug me, Yang Lingjie said with grievance. He didn't stop crying. Crying is contagious among children. Chi-Chi turned her head and looked at Yang Lingjie, who was crying loudly. She looked at her father, who was hugging him. And Chi-Chi also puckered her lips and cried bitterly towards the sky. Io, my sweetheart. Why are you crying? Su Jinfeng shook Kiki and comforted her. Kiki's voice was originally loud and clear. Although she came later, her voice gradually overshadowed the older Yang Lingjie. Not knowing if it was because he didn't want to be outdone, Yang Lingjie also opened his mouth and cried louder and louder. The two children's cries intertwined as if it was a crying duet. However, in such a loud crying, the symphony wasn't as pleasant. As long as Kiki cried, no one except Poplar Fruit could stop her. Poplar Fruit, who loved his daughter, quickly exchanged comforting partners with his mother. Kiki also returned to her father's arms. Under her father's gentle comforting, Kiki finally stopped crying. With tears in the corner of her eyes, she touched her father's ear and smiled through her tears. Yang Lingjie also gradually calmed down. He got his grandma's attention and comfort as he wished. In the end, he hugged Su Jinfeng's neck tightly and refused to let go. It was as if Su Jinfeng would abandon him if he let go. Poplar Fruit hugged Kiki. With one hand he opened the big suitcase full of gifts and took them out one by one. "Mom, look, these are the clothes I bought for you from Beijing." Poplar Fruit picked out a few big bags from the suitcase, and then took out a few colorful old clothes and showed them to his mother, Su Jinfeng. Although it was said to be old-age clothes, the style and color were quite trendy. "What's the point of wasting money? It's not like I'm wearing too many clothes." Su Jinfeng looked and said unforgivingly. Although she said she didn't want them, the expression on her face was blooming with joy. "Why did you buy so many expensive clothes? Won't people laugh at you if you wear them?" Su Jinfeng said. "How can that be? Mom, look, these clothes are very nice. If you wear them, you'll definitely look 10 years younger. Dad won't be able to keep it," Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "Child, how can you say that?" Su Jinfeng said with a smile. "Why would I keep it for her? With her looks, do I still need to keep it for her?" Young Tai said with dissatisfaction. "What's wrong? Do you think she's ugly now? Why didn't you say so earlier? If you said so earlier, I wouldn't have married you, old man." "Old." Su Jinfeng felt that this word was inappropriate. She paused and said, "Back then, I was also a flower in the 3 villages and 5 strongholds. If it wasn't for you being honest, would you have a chance?" Poplar Fruit smiled as he looked at his parents bickering. The old couple couldn't avoid these arguments in their life. However, their feelings didn't fade because of this. Instead, it was like tea leaves. The more they argued, the more mellow it became. "Dad, this is the hat and pipe I bought for you. There are also a few packs of good tobacco. However, you have to smoke less. These are enough to satisfy your craving. Smoking too much is not good for your health." Poplar Fruit said. "Why did you buy these? I only smoke hookahs. Take them away." Young Tai shouted. He pretended that he didn't care at all, but his eyes kept glancing at the pipe. "Our son bought it for you. Just take it. Why are you saying so much?" At this time, Su Jinfeng turned around and lectured Young Tai. "Shaojia." Poplar Fruit called. Young Linjia, who was lying in his grandmother's arms, turned his head and saw the transformer toy in Poplar Fruit's hand. "What a big one. It's bigger than the one I saw when I went shopping with Mom." Young Linjia's eyes lit up. Poplar Fruit held the transformer toy in his right hand and shook it. He smiled and said, "Shaojia, do you like it? Uncle bought it for you from Beijing." At this moment, the little grievance just now had disappeared from Young Linjia's heart. It was replaced by endless ecstasy. He broke free from his grandmother's arms and rushed to Poplar Fruit with joy. Isn't this the mood between children? It's bad fast, but it's good fast too. On the night of the Mid-Autumn Festival, I wish everyone can eat mooncakes and enjoy the moon. Most importantly, you can be with the person you like. Chapter 115. Poplar Fruit actually had one more thing to deal with when he came back this time. Previously, he had been busy taking care of Kiki, so he hadn't found a suitable place for Kiki's birth mother, Wu Yu. Poplar Fruit felt guilty. Wu Yu was an orphan, so it was impossible to trace back to her hometown. The saying of a fallen leaf returning to its roots could basically be rejected. Poplar Fruit pondered. Regardless of whether Wu Yu had feelings for him or not, she was still the mother of his precious daughter. He had also had a one-night stand with her, and she was still a pure girl when he did it with her. No matter what, he had to give her an explanation. Therefore, when he came back this time, Poplar Fruit brought back the urn of ashes on the top of the bookcase. He wanted to bury Wu Yu in his family's graveyard. Every year, during the Qingming festival, he could take care of her grave. When Kiki grew up, he could also bring her back to see her birth mother, whom she had never met. However, burying an outsider, nominally, let's just call Wu Yu an outsider for the time being, in his family's graveyard wasn't a small matter. His father, Yang Tai, was a big obstacle. Therefore, on the first night back, Poplar Fruit and his father lay on the bamboo bench in the yard and talked for a long time. Finally, his father was convinced. Yang Tai looked up at the starry sky and sighed deeply. He said, "Since you've made up your mind, go ahead and do it. Go early tomorrow and don't make a fuss. If the neighbors know, it'll be embarrassing. As for the family, I'll talk to your granduncle. It shouldn't be a big problem." Therefore, Poplar Fruit groped around in the dark at 4 o'clock in the morning. At that time, the sky was still dark, and the surroundings were quiet. Only Ah Fu stood up when it heard the noise. Poplar Fruit patted its head and said softly, "Ah Fu, it's okay. It's me." Then he carried Wu Yu's urn of ashes and a hoe and pushed the door open. When he passed by the villagers, the people who had dogs barked a few times. In order not to disturb the rest of the villagers, Poplar Fruit quickened his pace and trotted all the way. When he ran, he used a bit of skill. With a tap of his toes, he bounced up as soon as he landed. He was as light as a swallow, and in a flash he was already far away. The village did not turn on the street lights after midnight. Poplar Fruit could only rely on the twinkling starlight. Fortunately, his eyesight was better than most people's, and a little light was enough. The Yang family's graveyard was on the back of a small hill 2 to 3 kilometers away from the village. There was a clear lake beside it. Although the lake was not large, this graveyard had a bit of feng shui. The journey was neither far nor near. When Poplar Fruit arrived, the sky was already turning bright. However, at this moment, the shadows of the trees by the lake were swaying, and there was also a bit of wind. Amidst the whistling sounds, there were quite a few black shadows baring their fangs and brandishing their claws in the dim tombs. It was a sight that made one's heart go numb. Even Poplar Fruit had an impulse to turn around and run away. Don't be afraid, there are no ghosts in this world." Poplar Fruit trembled and whispered to comfort himself. Yes, there were no ghosts in this world. People scared others, and he scared himself too much, so there were ghosts. Poplar Fruit gathered his courage and walked closer. Only then did he realize that there were some plastic bags floating in the bushes. Poplar Fruit breathed a sigh of relief. He was a little speechless, and the fear in his heart suddenly disappeared. He picked a piece of land near his grandfather, and there were not too many tombs crowded together. He gently put the urn of ashes aside, then picked up the hoe and started to dig. If it was the Yang Guo of the past, he would be too weak to even stand up to a gust of wind, and wouldn't be able to handle this hoe. But now he was very strong. He could easily lift the hoe, and with a swing and a dig, a large piece of soil was turned over. If it's just the urn, Yang Guo doesn't need to dig a big grave. After digging a dozen times, the basic structure is dug out. After a little bit of trimming, a square 1 cubic meter grave is ready. Poplar Fruit clapped his hands, knelt on the ground, and picked up Wu Yu's urn of ashes. He gently stroked it, sighed softly, and said, "Wu Yu Kiki was born. Why didn't you persist? Why did you leave just like that?" Poplar Fruit seemed to have returned to the time when he rushed to the hospital. Wu Yu was lying alone on the hospital bed. Her face was pale, and her forehead was full of sweat. "I know you suffered a lot," Poplar Fruit muttered. "But you should have told me. Why did you bear it alone? Am I, Poplar Fruit, such an irresponsible person? If you had told me, you wouldn't have ended up like this. Kiki didn't have a mother when she was just born. Whatever I say now is all in hindsight. I know. I blame myself too." Poplar Fruit smiled bitterly. "When I saw you, I should have encouraged you more, instead of asking you this and that. I should have grabbed your hand and given you the confidence to live, instead of looking at you with suspicion. Why was I so stupid? You are also stupid. You didn't protect yourself. Is the child so important to you? You don't know, if it were another irresponsible man, Kiki would have become an orphan. Do you know?" Poplar Fruit said with a choked voice. "Aren't you afraid that our child will repeat the same mistake?" Poplar Fruit gently placed the urn in the center of the grave, stared at it, and said, "But don't worry. Since you sacrificed your life to give birth to Chi-Chi, since you've handed our child to me, I will definitely take responsibility until the end. Kiki is very good now. She eats well and drinks well. She is pampered by me at home, and outside, she is cared for by my grandparents and my friends. Oh, by the way, I didn't tell you, but I named our daughter Yang Luoqi. Yang is the Yang of Poplar Fruit, and Luoqi is the Luo and Qi next to the Wang character. The homonym is the fallen angel, which means an angel given to us by God. But according to our country's customs, she is our little fairy. Don't even mention how cute she is now. Regarding the two words angel and fairy, it is actually related to the change of the title of the book. You can look at the earlier works. But don't worry too much about these details. Poplar Fruit began to dig out the sand, pick up the stones, and slowly put them in with his hands. While filling the grave, he said, "So you can go without worry. In the future, I will often bring Kiki back to see you. Oh, by the way, our daughter is very smart. Have you seen any family's child who can speak at the age of 6? Our Chi-Chi can do it. She can call me daddy so easily now." "What, are you angry? She hasn't learned how to call mommy yet, right?" Poplar Fruit began to talk to himself, and answered his own question. "But don't worry, when we go back, I will let her learn. I guarantee that she will know how to call mommy. But if she asks who is mommy, why is mommy not here? What should I do?" Poplar Fruit didn't care about the dirt on his hands, and scratched his head and asked. Chapter 116. Okay, I got it. Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "I will find a stepmother for Kiki, so that she can feel the warmth of home. Of course, she must love Kiki, that's the prerequisite." Poplar Fruit was talking to himself, while filling up Wu Yu's grave. Then he took out a rectangular piece of wood from the long bag on his back. When he returned to Yangcheng City, Poplar Fruit went to find a carpenter to make it. It was engraved with the words "My wife, Wu Yu's grave," erected by Poplar Fruit. "I was in a hurry, so I didn't have time to prepare a tombstone for you. How about this?" Poplar Fruit said with a smile. "When I come back next year, I will give you a better one." After erecting the tombstone, Poplar Fruit stood up. He held the hoe and looked at the hazy sky. It was almost 5 o'clock, and the villagers were about to get up and get ready to go to work. Yang Guo was not in a hurry to go back. He looked around and then walked to the lakeside. He used a hoe to carefully dig out a Chinese redbud that had just grown for less than a year, along with its roots. Chinese redbud was a relatively common shrub in the south. It was very different from the Chinese redbud in Hong Kong. It was not as beautiful, but it was more adaptable to the environment. During the process of transplanting, even if it was planted in the sand, it could still survive. The reason why Yang Guo chose Bauhinia was because he remembered a poem by the Tang Dynasty poet Wei Yingguo, "Seeing the Bauhinia flower. Miscellaneous heroes have accumulated, leaving only the fragrance in the late spring, like the trees in the old garden, suddenly remembering the people in the old garden." The Chinese redbud flower also had the meaning of family harmony and deep affection. Perhaps it was the most suitable to use it to commemorate the passing of Wu Yu. This redbud was still young, and he estimated that it would only bloom next year or the year after. By the time the flower bloomed, Chi-Chi should have grown up. At that time, bringing her to see Wu Yu and seeing the flower bloom brilliantly might not be a bad thing. Poplar Fruit carefully planted the Chinese redbud in front of Wu Yu's grave. He was worried that its roots would disturb Wu Yu. After planting it, Poplar Fruit stood up with a smile, clapped his hands and said, "Wu Yu, I will stop here today. I have helped you to prepare the place. You can rest in peace. In the future, I will come to see you often." Poplar Fruit looked at the newly built grave affectionately, picked up the hoe and walked back to the village without looking back. The sky was already bright. When he returned to the village, Poplar Fruit could hear many people washing and talking in the courtyard. The farmers all woke up at sunrise and returned at sunset. It was not strange for them to wake up at 5 o'clock. If they woke up late, people would say that they were lazy. Fortunately, Poplar Fruit did not meet anyone on the way home. This saved him the trouble of making up excuses. A few years ago, his parents also woke up early to take the cows to work in the fields. After Poplar Fruit let them rest for 2 years, his parents did not need to wake up so early. Poplar Fruit returned to the courtyard. The house was still quiet. He was not sleepy anymore. After washing his hands, he started his morning practice in the courtyard. He still practiced his Tai Chi first. He practiced slowly. He fully stimulated and honed every muscle and cell in his body. Then he practiced quickly. His movements were so fast that his shadow could not be seen clearly. When he was about to stop, his father's voice suddenly came from behind him. Not bad. You are much better than the old man I saw when I went to your sister's place. Yang Tai said with a smile. No wonder you grew so tall in a year. Poplar Fruit was speechless. How could the Tai Chi that the aunties and old men in the park practice be compared with his? But he did not intend to explain to Yang Tai. He wiped his sweat, turned around and smiled at Yang Tai. Dad, why are you up so early? Why don't you sleep a little longer? It's okay. I am old. I will wake up by myself if I sleep at this time. Yang Tai waved his hand and said. He walked under the eaves, took a dry towel, and wiped the dewy bamboo bench in the courtyard. Then he lay down comfortably. After a while he asked, Is everything done? Poplar Fruit nodded and said, It's done. That's good. Yang Tai squinted his eyes. He grabbed a cattail leaf fan and gently shook it. Your mother has been nagging me about this for a long time. Don't worry. If you do it well, I will take care of it for you later. It's not a big deal. Even though Yang Tai was a yes man in front of Su Jinfeng at home, in the clan he could be considered as a person of authority. He was also a character in the village. Sometimes, when it came to important matters in the village, such as the foreign students and the village chief, they would ask him for advice. This was also what Yang Guo admired about her father. Last night, Su Jinfeng could not hold back and told Yang Ping the news of Poplar Fruit's return. Therefore, this morning, Yang Ping and her brother-in-law, Yang Chongguan, rushed back from the county. When she saw Poplar Fruit, Yang Ping did not dare to recognize him. She really could not believe that the brother she had watched grow up had become so tall in the blink of an eye. He did not look like a southerner at all. When the two of them came back, their son, Yang Lingjie, was the happiest. However, Yang Lingjia's limelight was once again stolen by Kiki. Yang Ping just hugged and kissed her baby son and put him aside. She intimately hugged Kiki and looked at her left and right. Yang Lingjie was not jealous like yesterday. The Transformer's toy Poplar Fruit gave him was not warm yet. After he was put down by his mother, he ran into the house and took the Transformer's toy out, showing it off in front of his father. After putting down Kiki, Yang Ping pulled Poplar Fruit aside and said with a serious face, Fruit, what are you thinking? What do you mean, what am I thinking? Poplar Fruit laughed. You are not married yet, and you have a. Yang Ping stuttered towards the end. Poplar Fruit knew that she wanted to say the word burden. But Poplar Fruit did not blame her. Sis, don't worry about me. Poplar Fruit patted Yang Ping's shoulder and laughed. How can I not worry about you? Yang Ping was a little annoyed. She said, Mom told me that you only went for one blind date that she arranged for you. After that, you never went again. If you don't interact more with other girls, how can you find a wife? Poplar Fruit did not know whether to laugh or cry. He said, Sis, don't mention blind dates. Blind dates are the most unreliable thing. Yang Ping glared at him and said, Who said they are unreliable? Didn't I meet your brother-in-law through a blind date? That's different. You are lucky. No, my brother-in-law is lucky. Poplar Fruit laughed. Moreover, I am 23 or 24 years old this year. Is it necessary to worry about my marriage so soon? If you don't have a child, you can play however you want. But it is different now. Yang Ping said with disappointment. If you don't get married while the child is still young, what if the child grows up and is sensible and refuses to let you find a wife? Besides, at that time, other girls will despise you for having such a big child. You can't hide it even if you want to. I don't have to hide it. When I find a wife, she must first be able to accept and like Kiki. This is the prerequisite. Poplar Fruit said seriously. If she doesn't like Kiki, I won't accept her. Also, I think that you don't have to worry about me. When fate comes, my wife will come. After chatting with his sister for a while, Poplar Fruit, his mother, sister, and brother-in-law, Yang Chongguan, drove to town to buy groceries. Because it was not only Poplar Fruit's family, but also a few uncles and other relatives in the family were invited for dinner. It was considered as bringing Kiki to everyone, so there were a lot of groceries to buy. The whole family was mobilized. and only young Tai stayed at home to look after young Linjia. Carrying Kiki, Poplar Fruit smiled and followed behind them with a basket. The market in town was not as clean as the one in Yangcheng, but it was better in terms of the variety of vegetables, especially the seafood, which was just delivered by the fishermen who went out to sea last night. It was dripping with water and very fresh, and none of it was frozen. Many people in the market in town were from the village, so they were very familiar with his mother and sister. Seeing Su Jinfeng greet them, Poplar Fruit could only open his mouth, not knowing how to address them. Actually, Poplar Fruit still had some impressions, but after entering high school and university, his knowledge and circle of friends were no longer limited to the small town. His memories of the past were not very good, and now they were all blurred. Poplar Fruit could not help with the cooking, so his mother, sister, and a few other village women took over the chores. Poplar Fruit also did not have time to help, as he was busy comforting the crying Kiki. Kiki was originally very happy today, as she could go shopping with her father, and even take the car. But when she got home, all the aunts and uncles came to see her. The cute Kiki was naturally loved by everyone, but it was not enough to see her. Soon, Kiki was carried out from her father's arms, and a few women smiled and hugged her. Those who were hugging Chi-Chi were reluctant to put her down, while those who were waiting couldn't help but touch Chi-Chi's delicate little face. In a flurry of hands and feet, Chi-Chi was tormented by this group of women who were full of maternal instincts. Kiki's mood quickly turned from sunny to cloudy, and finally, she could not bear it anymore and simply cried. She waved her little hands, crying and shouting loudly and vaguely, "Dad, Dad." Poplar Fruit heard the cry and ran over, feeling sorry for his daughter, and hurriedly carried Kiki back. But Kiki did not cooperate this time. She was still unwilling to stop when she returned to her father's arms. She hugged her father's neck and sobbed pitifully. Her tears were all over Poplar Fruit's neck, and she only stopped when it was almost time to eat. The banquet in the countryside was naturally not as exquisite as in a big hotel, but it was very sumptuous. Fish, scallops, prawns, small abalones, and other seafood were dazzling. Chicken, duck, streaky pork, roast suckling pig, and other meat dishes filled the plates into a small mountain. There was no delicate cooking, just a big wok with a big fire. It was enough to stir-fry. Everyone was not very picky, and they just ate for fun. Many people sat down to eat, and then left in a hurry. Only the few granduncles at the main table sat there calmly. Young Tai accompanied them to chat and drink, and it was quite comfortable. Poplar Fruit was busy clinking glasses with the relatives who came to toast and congratulate him. Poplar Fruit had vowed not to drink again, and this time, he also did not drink. He secretly prepared a bottle of plain water for himself, and with this bottle of plain water, he hid from many people. The house was lively, and it made Poplar Fruit forget about the sadness of burying Wu Yu in the morning. Indeed, the dead can rest in peace, and the living still have to live well. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Everyone use your votes to support the poor. Greater than over equal to, that you're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.